My wife and I wrote our memoir of our time at CIA, and they classified the entire thing. This is the kind of tradecraft that no one's ever talked about before. This is about real-time operations still happening today against America's largest adversaries. And this is part of what made CIA so nervous. My wife and I wrote our memoir of our time at CIA back in 2021. And then the world exploded in 2022. CIA received our manuscript for review and approval, and they classified the entire thing. Just shut the whole book process down. They said everything in this document, I think the specific terminology in their email to us was the premise and content of this manuscript is considered fully classified from end to end, which is bullshit.
Right.
You can't, there's a very specific definition for classified information. There's a burden of evidence for classified information. So there's all sorts of stuff that made that BS. But the message that they were sending was, if you want to publish this, we're going to make it very, very difficult.
Right.
So CIA's tactic with a lot of former officers isn't necessarily to press charges. It's to make it so hard to get it published that the publisher gives up on you,
right,
that producers give up on you, that the audience, like the American people, kind of give up on paying attention. So that was their tactic. At the time, because it's my wife and I, and we're two different people, the tactic worked on her. She saw CIA say no, and she did not want to cross CIA.
Right.
And my wife is a smart former CIA officer herself, and she said, we should stop. But for me, it did the opposite. For me, I was just like, fuck no. Like, we got to push harder now.
Yeah.
This isn't classified. This is important enough that they would call it classified. We have to move forward.
Right. So how did you go about that? Did you write a letter? Did you get an attorney? Did you?
So for the first year, we tried to work it out
writing letters.
Cordially. Yeah. We tried to send them a note, and then 35 days later they'd respond, and we tried making edits, and then we'd submit it again, and 90 days later they'd come back and say your edits weren't good enough. So for a year we tried that way. Then we retained an attorney, and we went and got one of the most successful attorneys in the classified information business. His name's Mark Zaid, super famous guy in the world of former CIA and military and diplomats who want to write books. And Mark came on, and Mark started to counsel us, and Mark reviewed the project as much as he could, because technically he couldn't read the story because it was classified. So you could see how much of a pain in the ass CIA was successfully making this whole bit. But what we came across is that the story is really, at its core, about a mole hunt. A mole that CIA had never disclosed to the public that was penetrated into CIA. And how my wife and I were used as bait for CIA to catch that mole.
Oh, okay.
Well, once that became relevant, once our attorney realized, oh, you were the ones who were put in harm's way without being informed that you were being put in harm's way, that made it a First Amendment issue.
Oh, okay. So you didn't know going in that they put you in gave you an assignment, put you out here telling you, hey, you guys are gathering evidence doing this. But really they're trying to wait for the mole to pass that information on to somebody else, which you definitely were in danger of being grabbed, because now some government. Do we know the government, or
we've had to use pseudonyms,
right,
to cover the names of the assets that we worked with, to of course cover the names of the key players. So like our mole, we can't call our mole by his real name.
Yeah.
But we can say that there was a mole. It's publicly disclosed now. Our book will be the first book to ever publicly expose this CIA mole. And then we had to cover it through pseudonyms and cryptonyms because that was CIA's request.
Okay. So would you come up with a fictitious country?
More like an encrypted country.
Oh, okay.
So it's a real country, but we just can't call it by its country name. So we call it Falcon.
See? Yeah. It's kind of, yeah. So that's cool. I would have come up with something better. Falcon. I would have.
Oh, we tried. So we tried. So here's what's funny, right? We tried to come up with
Kukistan.
We tried to come up with
something
totally interesting stuff. But here's what, every step of the way, CIA was fighting us. So I shit you not, we came up with one whole set of cryptonyms for the country and for the assets that made it so that the country and the assets didn't have a connection to each other, because we didn't want people to be able
to kind of guess, like, oh, it was Iran.
Well, it wasn't. We weren't worried about American people. If anything, we want to maximize our transparency for Americans. What was our concern and CIA's concern was our adversaries, because anything you sell on Amazon somebody else can buy. Russia can buy it, Iran can buy it, North Korea can buy it, China can buy it, right? Anybody can buy what you put out there. So what we didn't want was to equip our adversaries with information that they could use to reverse engineer CIA operations that were current. The other thing that's really important to understand here is our book is the most contemporary, current memoir on CIA tradecraft that's ever been written. This isn't something that was written about the war on terror. This isn't something that's written about the Cold War. This is about real-time operations still happening today against America's largest adversaries. So real-time operations, what we started in our shadow cell, the name of the book, those operations are still happening now. So we had to protect them as best we could. So we came up with a whole suite of names. And then CIA came in and said, all of these names they don't meet our requirement for proper clandestinity. So we want you to change them all so that they are American wildlife names. Because if you use this name, it sounds like you're talking about this country. If you use this color, it sounds like you're talking about that country. If you, whatever else. So we were like, okay, so now we have wolf, falcon, right? We talked about whether or not we want to have bear or whether we want to have pigeon or whatever the hell else. So everything is encrypted after American wildlife.
Silly. Because to me, if you were talking about Russia and you said, to me, Russia would be a bear, could be a bear. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of countries that like America, to me, is an eagle. Like most countries have some kind of an association with some type of an animal, right? Like isn't it Iran or Iraq is like a lion? You know what I'm saying? A lot of them. So that,
and they don't make sense.
It does nothing.
But this is all just part of the government game, right? The government game is just a game of putting as many barriers in your way as it can in the hopes that you give up.
Well, you didn't give up, and you got to and it's a love story. No, I'm just joking. I'm assuming it is.
There's a little bit of love story in there. It's funny because there's what I love about the story that we've built is that it was shaped by many people, right? My wife and I wrote it, but it was shaped by the publisher, shaped by our editor. Of course, it was shaped by my wife, who sees things very differently than I see things, and so for that reason, yes, there's a story of two young people meeting at CIA, falling in love, and then ultimately being assigned on the same operation, and that's what we got to do. That's why she loves it, and that's why the publisher loves it. What I love about our story is it's about two fucking people who were given the ability to be criminals in a foreign country.
Right.
I love that. Here's what we got to do. Here's how we did it. Here's, the specific tradecraft that we use along the way to not get caught by local police, to not get caught, transiting borders. Here's how we changed our aliases to stupefy flight manifestos. Like it was such a fun time. And I guess that's, for me, the thing that I get really jazzed about with espionage, because espionage is illegal.
Right.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah. Like
the people that I feel like I can connect with the most are oftentimes criminals, because criminals get this lifestyle.
I get it. So there's multiple things that have kind of come into my head while you were talking. Did you ever see, I always talk about movies, bro. It's always movies. But as you were talking, I was thinking, did you ever see the movie with Kevin Costner, No Way Out?
I feel like I have, but I don't remember it.
God, bro. I actually was talking about this movie within the last week to my wife, one of the many movies that I forced her to watch where all right, we'll watch it tomorrow. And it's Kevin Costner is working in the Pentagon. His boss is having an affair. His boss ends up killing the woman. And so to cover it up, they say that Yuri, which is a hidden inside mole that has always been believed to be operating inside the Pentagon, that Yuri killed this girl. And so they're searching for Yuri to try and divert attention from who really killed her.
Right.
Because he was also sleeping with the girl, Kevin Costner's character. The problem is you find out through the whole thing he's covering this and dodging this because he's afraid they're going to find him, but you think Kevin Costner's character. The truth is, at the very end of the movie, you realize, no, he is Yuri. Like, he really is Yuri. Like, it was all made up by them to divert attention, but the truth is, he is Yuri. In the very end, the Russians grab him and everything. They've got him in there, and they come and sit down, and they start talking to him, and he starts speaking Russian, and you realize, like, like some of the things that you didn't quite understand, like, now absolutely makes sense, but it was great. But the thing that I don't understand is, well, and we can, if you want, can we kind of go over the story?
Yeah.
At this point, because I'm very curious to know. at what point, don't tell me now, but my curiosity is that at what point do you realize, like, oh, you're using us as bait? Like at that moment, that's got to be a fucked up realization. Like, oh no, that's not cool, you know? But when you're buried in credit card and loan debt, it's human nature to put it off and say, I'll deal with this later. If that's you, here's a hidden fact that the debt strategy experts at Done With Debt shared with me. They discovered a little-known strategy that works in your favor to dramatically reduce or even erase your debt altogether. They aggressively engage everyone you owe money to in September, and here's why. They know which lenders and credit card companies are doing year-end accounting and need to cut deals. They even know which ones have year-end audits and need to get your debt off their books. That means you need to get started with Done With Debt now in September. Done With Debt accomplishes this without bankruptcy or new loans. In fact, most clients end up with more money in their pocket the first month. Get started now while you still have time. Go to donewithdebt.com and talk with one of their specialists for free. Visit donewithdebt.com. Once again, that's donewithdebt.com. Fall is here, and that means football, tailgates, and big comfort meals. But here's the thing. I don't want to spend hours in the kitchen after a long day. That's why I go with Omaha Steaks. The other night, I made their filet mignon. They were juicy, tender, and packed with flavor. I've also got their burgers and chicken wings in the freezer, and it's perfect for sitting down in front of the TV and watching a true crime documentary. It's easy, fast, and the quality is amazing. Omaha Steaks has it all. Steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, even desserts. Every bite is backed by their 100% guarantee, and you can taste the difference. Get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Red Hot sales event. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code INSIDE at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code INSIDE at checkout. See site for details. Let's go back to the beginning when you first started at CIA and you first get there and you were in the Navy?
I was in the Air Force. Yeah, so close, so far away.
Right, and you came in, and that's when you met your wife, right?
Right. So my wife and I were both recruited to CIA through two different recruitment methods. I was contacted by a recruiter. She was an online application. I came from the military. She came from the world of basically social work. And we came in for two different skill sets. I came in to be a core collector or an intelligence collector in the field, somebody who actually meets with assets. She came in to be what was known as a targeter. A targeter is the person who identifies human sources of information. So this was at a very kind of transformational time for CIA. They were transitioning after the 9/11 event in 2001, after the 9/11 Commission in 2003. So there was a huge hiring surge and a whole new kind of shaping effort to build this more professional CIA. And in the middle of this, we came in a giant group of new recruits. I think there were 250 people in our class, which is massive compared to what was traditional. Traditionally, it was like 25 new people would come in 3 times a year.
Well, also, I think that they typically were hiring like lawyers. Like most of the CIA was like white males with law degrees, and when you're having people fly planes into buildings, it's hard to infiltrate those types of organizations when you've got 4 people on staff that speak Arabic and everybody's a pale face.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got no brown people in this bunch.
Correct. And that was the traditional CIA. So now they're transforming that, right? More women, more minorities, more age differences, different religions, different backgrounds in education. Because you're right, the traditional role, the traditional model for hiring was advanced degrees, Caucasian person, multiple generations in the United States.
Right.
That was kind of what they were looking for. Well, now all of a sudden,
which would be great if you were in the if you were functioning in the United States.
And since the idea used to be, as silly as this is, the idea used to be send white people into foreign countries and let everyone know they're American, because then they're just going to come and want to sell their secrets. Because when you are American and you go to a foreign country,
they think you have money.
They think you have money.
Right.
And it was really easy. That's kind of how things worked in the Cold War era. But you're right. Post 9/11, it's the war on terror. It's a completely different world. And dual docked citizens are now something they want. People who are naturalized American citizens is something they want. People whose parents are first generation immigrants, that's something they want. And it's a whole different world. And of course, you can imagine the culture challenge when you start going through training, because here I am, a brown 27-year-old military kid with no advanced degree, and my wife, who's got 3 advanced degrees, but is her dad was born in Venezuela, right? So she's first generation U.S. citizen. When the two of us go up against some like seasoned gray-haired white guy who's Cold War his whole career and he's 27 years in the agency, he's looking at us thinking that we're dumb shits.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the soup that we found ourselves in. And in that soup, we kind of collided with each other. We were friends. We were attracted to each other at first, but we were both there for our careers. So there was this weird sort of avoidant effort from both of us where we were like, hey, if we hook up, that's cool, but we shouldn't get serious. And anybody who's been in a relationship like that knows what I'm talking about. And that's where we started. What happened is my wife was very successful in her career right from the beginning. I had struggles. I struggled with authority. I struggled with policy. I struggled with principles. So we had these 2 very different trajectories in our career that ultimately got us to the place where she was very well respected and I was very disposable, and we got engaged and we committed to marriage. And that's something CIA hates. CIA does not like it when its officers get married.
Okay. So but you got married. When you were married, were you already kind of in the field? And you said she wasn't really in the field.
Correct. So I was in a position where I was traveling for short-term operations, something that we would call TDY, temporary duty yonder. So I do these short operations in these shitty places because I'm not really a high-stakes officer. I'm not really a pat on the back kind of badged award-winning officer. So I just go deal with fucking narco traffickers and drug dealers and human smugglers and shitbirds all over the world for 2 or 4 weeks at a time. She was a targeter who stayed in headquarters in Langley and identified high priority targets that would be sent all over the world. So we had these 2 very different jobs and these 2 different trajectories. When we got married, CIA's big kind of beef with that is just, well, now we have to blend the 2 of your cover stories and your cover identities together and all this extra administrative work that they didn't want to have to do. We often joke, CIA is the first organization to help fund your divorce.
Right.
But they're going to do everything they can to slow down your marriage. And that's not just marriage between 2 officers. That's marriage between an officer and a U.S. citizen, or marriage between an officer and a foreign national, right? You name it. Yeah, they don't want to see you get married.
And that's because because it makes it more difficult. It's hard if a guy's married, it's hard to say, hey, by the way, for the next 18 months, you're going to be living here and you can't have any contact with your wife. Like that's a hard pill to swallow.
Correct. Yeah, it's a hard sell because administratively it's difficult. But then the other big thing is culturally, where's your loyalty lie? Is your loyalty now to the job more than to your spouse? And what happens when kids are born?
Right.
Where does your loyalty go there? And CIA does not like having unclear loyalty.
I see some guys being like 18 months. Baby, I tried. Gotta go.
Yeah, until they're sent to Mozambique or they're sent to fucking Timbuktu. I actually had a buddy who was sent to Timbuktu for 12 months. And
is that a real place?
It's a real place. He was so upset. He was so upset that he had to go to Timbuktu. And then in hindsight, he talks about how it was one of his favorite assignments ever. Because everybody there was so miserable. He was like, holy shit, everybody here's having fun.
So how do they come to you with the 2 of you with, hey, we're going to connect the 2 of you and here's an assignment for you?
So they come to us with an assignment, and what they tell us is that we need a whole new way of running operations against this high priority American target. It's an adversary, Falcon, and Falcon is a real country, and Falcon is a real adversary for the United States, and they are a strategic threat to the United States. So my wife and I, as 2 junior officers, second tour officers, which means that we've been through training, we've been through 1 formal tour at CIA in our career category, and now we're getting ready for our second tour. As second tour officers, we're stoked because, we get to create something new against a strategic threat, which means that's a lot of career advancement if we do a good job.
Right.
And we get to work together. So we're super excited about that. So for us, it was all, as soon as they told us, pat on the back, we're ready to rock and roll. Later on, when like my suspicious self started to kick in, I kind of pulled my wife aside and I was like, yeah, does this seem strange to you? Like, you're really good. I'm not. They're putting us together to do this hard thing. Does that not seem odd? Why would they give me, why wouldn't they put you with some other superstar?
Right.
Why would they even invite me? So there were all these kind of questions that started to bubble up. And again, my wife and I being two very different people, I'm suspicious of the whole thing. And she thinks that CIA like had some revelation where they realized they'd been treating me wrong. She's like, oh no, CIA just realizes you are talented, and CIA realizes you are hardworking, and CIA realizes you are committed. And this is them extending a fig leaf to you to say.
Yeah, because they're always looking out for me.
So it was just such a funny time in hindsight, stressful time in the moment, but funny time in hindsight, because she really thought they were like being a kind-hearted professional organization. And I thought they were being like sketchy.
Right. Yeah. Like but you're, like you said, expendable, but she's not. So I would have been like, yeah, me. Okay. I get it. They put me in a situation where if I fail or something goes wrong, who'd they lose?
Right.
They're not impressed by me anyway.
Right.
But her, they wouldn't put you in that position. I don't think, but for some reason, I guess she was expendable too.
Well, so, and that's what I was telling. That was another element in the story that didn't make sense. Why are they sending you
right
into the field with me?
Yeah.
Like that basically means that your safety and security is on my shoulders, and you are a highly like decorated, successful, highly desirable officer.
Well, maybe so they could have somebody to blame it on. If something does go wrong, we just blame it on Bustamante.
And that was one of the things that we kind of landed on too, is that the idea here was if the worst happened, wherever we went, she wasn't going to be on the bleeding edge, right? Wherever we went, she was going to be in a hardened facility and I would be out there collecting. So that was essentially what we were expecting it to look like. And after, again, in the process of writing this book, we realized, well, shit, girl, like if I would have died, if I would have gotten captured, if I would have gotten killed, that would have made her a widower or a widow to, quote unquote, someone who died in the line of duty. That would have absolutely ironed her loyalty to CIA forever.
Right.
Otherwise, what's the point? Like, this is a tool that the military uses all the time. You go to battle, your brother dies in battle, and then you are the one carrying the burden of, well, what did he die for?
Mm-hmm.
Well, shit, I can't quit now, otherwise his death is meaningless. So now I'm going to take it even harder than the enemy.
In. Well, so what was? Well, I have a question. So what was? I understand you're saying gather assets, but I mean, like, what are you doing? And my other question is, if they're going to send you into a country, this is like a third world country, I'm assuming, that I think we had kind of. I think last time our interview, that's what I got the impression it was like a third world country, because you had said that like you were working in a factory or something. But do they send you in first and then you're there for 2 months and then she comes in and you guys act like you meet and you start dating and she moves in? Or do you guys show up with a moving van like, hey, we just moved from Caracas and we just drove here 150 miles and we're married and we're going to move into this apartment, and then you go trying to get a job and you get a job and she gets a job? I mean, is it like that?
So it's funny because this is the kind of tradecraft that no one's ever talked about before that we were excited to share in our story.
Right.
So we detail it all in Shadow Cell, but essentially, and this is part of what made CIA so nervous, the way it works is that when you are deployed from CIA, you go to what we call a third country location. That third country location is an area where you do not operate.
Right.
You just live. And then from that location, you deploy a second time to go to wherever you need to go. And then the reason that you do that is it allows you to jump from country to country and essentially change your ID in every country. So imagine you start in Caracas. Caracas is a very difficult place to start. You start in Spain.
Okay.
You fly from Spain to Armenia. In Armenia, your flight under name A, under Matt Cox, your flight under Matt Cox ends. So the manifest says Matt Cox has landed in Armenia. Now Matt Cox is in Armenia. Well, on your person, you're carrying a second ID. So now from Armenia, you become John Tybalt. John Tybalt has a ticket from Armenia to Slovakia. And there's a flight manifesto for John Tybalt that starts in Armenia and ends in Slovakia. By the time you get to Slovakia, nobody realizes John Tybalt is Matt Cox, and Matt Cox actually started in Spain. That's how we work, travel, and that's how we manage to cover up our steps. It's called dry cleaning. It's how we dry clean our steps from country to country. So with my wife and I, we deployed as a married couple to a third country location. So everybody in that third country location knew that we were a married couple. But then every time we deployed operationally, we would deploy using this dry cleaning method, and we would essentially hit as many cleaning countries as we needed to ensure that there was no connection between our final destination and our starting destination.
See, I would think I would go there and live as John Doe for a couple of months and then go from there to somewhere, to whatever my destination is. That way, if people got wise at my final destination and they backtracked me, they'd be like, well, they rented an apartment. So if they go to your landlord, they would say, hey, do you know who this person is? Oh yeah, that's John Doe. He used to rent here. Oh, okay. Hey, who's this person? Yeah. He used to run he used to sell apples at the whatever out of a cart. Yeah, I know him. That way they'd be like, okay, this is a real person, but maybe doesn't have a long history. But he's somebody that is backtracked.
And I think that's one of the big differences between what movies portray and how real espionage works. Right? Because in movies, what they make you believe that you want to have a realistic backstory.
Right.
Why? The only reason to have a realistic backstory is for when an investigation happens and they start to investigate you.
Right.
Real espionage wants to avoid the investigation at all. If the investigation starts, we want it to hit a complete dead end. So when John Tybalt falls under investigation and they backtrack him to Armenia,
they can't find
nothing. Who's John Tybalt? There's nothing. There is literally nothing there. The man seemed to appear out of nowhere. So is that suspicious? Sure, that's suspicious. But the idea is we're always collecting intelligence. So once John Tybalt becomes suspicious, we know.
I got to talk to him about that. That's a bad idea.
You got to go in a different way.
Yeah, we got to go a different way. To me, when I was changed my identity and moved to a different state, when I was wanted, when I showed up, I had a cover story, but I'd also have I've got a website. I've got, what I'm saying? I have things that show that I lived in somewhere else where you kind of have a backstory. Why are you here? I own a mortgage company. I sold the mortgage company. You know what I'm saying? That sort of thing. I could see, I mean, it's not like I did it a lot or anything. It's not like, I was more the cover story than anything. And, because if you look too much into it, it breaks down very quickly.
And that's the challenge. The challenge is if you look too much into it, it breaks down.
Unless you had just a bunch of time.
And there becomes more and more evidence.
Right. So if you had a year or so where you could really establish yourself here and then move, you see what I'm saying? Then they go here and then they get there and they go, well, he was here for a year. And then after that, it falls apart. I don't know. It's hard to. You'd have to have way too much time to really build a solid story.
And what you're getting into now is the classic kind of KGB illegals program model, where somebody comes here as an illegal from KGB, and they build a whole life here. And they have to build a whole life here because the idea is when they fall under scrutiny, they're not going to be able to flee back to the Soviet Union. They're going to have to stand here and continue to live that cover. So you need 3, 5, 12, 15 years of history so that when investigators probe into you, they don't see any Russian connection.
We just show the series Salt, where not Salt. I'm sorry, that was
The Americans.
But that was The Americans. Yeah, Salt did the same thing. She came when she was like a little kid, but The Americans was great. They come, they fall in love, they have kids, they have nobody has any idea. Been there for decades.
Yeah, and that's the model for some countries. That's not the model in the United States because we change presidents every 4 years. We change who controls the House every 2 years. So it's very hard for us to have long-term, deep-seated operations like that. But our adversaries run those all the time. The Chinese run those. The Russians run those.
Well, they catch the Chinese all the time. They're working here as an engineer. He's been here for 15 years, and you find out he's been a spy for 15 years. He's been sending submarine, schematics through some means for the past 10, 15 years. And you're like,
and think about that, right? They catch Chinese all the time.
Yeah.
Which means there's always more Chinese to catch.
Oh, yeah. For everyone you caught, how many are never getting caught?
Exactly. The rule of thumb that I learned afterwards is that for every one mole we identify, we assume there's 5 others. That's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like, you never think about that. You never think about if you catch one, you feel like, oh, let's pat ourselves on the back, high five, we caught the bad guy. No.
Yeah.
If that one is there, let's just assume that there's 4 others in addition to that one. So there's a total of 5 at any given time.
Yeah, it's like getting caught for a drug deal. You know, you got caught for one drug. There's 100 other ones you didn't get caught for. Like, these guys been doing this forever. So you were supposed to gather information. You go somewhere, you show up, you and your wife show up, you're living in an apartment. You're like, what is the basic understanding? Can you explain kind of what they told you you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were sent there under a cover purpose, something that's known as a cover for status. That's an official tradecraft term, is cover for status. And there's 2 types of covers that are predominantly used. There's a cover for status and a cover for action. Cover for status is why you are where you are. Cover for action is why you're doing what you're doing where you are. So you can see how one is kind of generalized and one is more specific. So we went to our 3rd country location. All we really needed to have was a cover for status, why you're there. So they gave us a cover job. They gave us a cover purpose. They gave us everything we needed to so that we could get an apartment and we could get a car and we could have a life. And all that cover for status in the 3rd world country, or in the 3rd country, was set up. Also, while we were there, the technical requirement, and this is silly to get into technicalities, but the technical requirement was for us to build new operations, build a whole new methodology of operating. That didn't necessarily require that we ourselves collected the intelligence. It meant that we would build an infrastructure that we could use to collect intelligence. So I say that because the infrastructure that we decided to build was completely different than anything CIA had used before. We wanted to model operations off of something that our adversaries had never seen Americans do. And we also wanted to model it off of an MO that we somehow understood, which you can see the difficulty there. How do you understand an MO if you've never done the MO? And that's when my wife came up with the idea. We had both participated in the war on terror. And the United States had almost a decade's worth of information on the modus operandi of terrorist cells. But we were the only assholes in the world fighting that war. Chinese weren't, the Russians weren't, the North Koreans weren't, the Iranians weren't. It was just us, right? The Canadians and the Australians were kind of forced to play. So we modeled our operations off of terrorist operations. We modeled our MO off of terrorist MO. We modeled our communications, our financing, our strategic decision-making, all off of how terrorist cells are decentralized and they don't communicate back to the master bureaucracy except through individual nodes, couriers who run back and forth. So that was when we arrived in our country and we started to build our infrastructure. That was the infrastructure that we built, this terrorist model. So instead of creating an intelligence group, we created an intelligence cell. And that model is how we chose to start going out and identifying targets and collecting intelligence.
Are you recruiting people? You're recruiting people? And how do you recruit somebody? Is it money? I mean, is it like, hey, you're in a position, do you bump into a guy, you've been watching somebody, he's in a good spot, you watch him for a few days and you bump into him, he goes to Starbucks every day and you bump into Starbucks a couple times, you start chatting him up, and then after a month of being buddies, you say, by the way.
So this is where the good decision-making of CIA came in. They sent Jihi, my wife, who was this stellar targeter. We didn't need to just go to Starbucks and bump into somebody. She had the full power of CIA's databases behind her. Plus, she was able to use her cover position as a reason to build relationships with the 3rd country as well. So she was able to tap into police records, border crossing records, all sorts of stuff in the local country, and supplement that with all of what we had at CIA. She was able to find targets all day long. Relevant, powerful, interesting people, along with their vulnerabilities, their motivations, the ways that they were breaking the law, the affairs they were having, their routes to and from work, their cell phone identifiers. Like, she was able to find an incredible amount of information that made it easier for us to find the people we wanted to talk to. Because we were creating this model based off of terrorist cells, we had to have a courier. Well, the courier is the one major vulnerability in the cell, because if you identify the courier, you basically identify the cell. That's what happened to
Bin Laden.
We identified the courier, followed the courier, hit the entire base where bin Laden was at. So we didn't want to recruit a courier. We wanted to keep the courier in-house. So we identified me as the courier. So my wife was the targeter, and I was essentially the primary point of contact between CIA and all of our operations at the cell, acting as the courier. So what we needed to recruit first was other CIA officers to go out and collect the intelligence. So that was our first job. Our first job was finding the CIA officers that were in Wolf already, in the country where we were operating, the third world, the third party country, find officers that were there and essentially pitch and sell them on the idea of, hey, we know you're doing stuff for your job, but you really want to come work for us. And that was how we started building a cell. So we got lucky because the first person that we approached was like a mid-level careerist who was really frustrated with CIA. And when we approached him and we were like, hey, you have to keep doing things the same way you've always done them in a box.
Yeah, I don't understand. You said he was frustrated with CIA.
Correct.
I thought you were in another country.
So he was a CIA officer already in that country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when we arrive, this is what people don't realize. We're everywhere. So when you get to a country, you already kind of land in a community of people who are already there. Depending on their level of cover and their status, et cetera, you can engage some. You have to be compartmentalized from others. But of the officers that were in country in Wolf, we were able to identify them, validate them, and approach them directly and say, hey, do you want to come work for us?
Right.
Or do you want to keep doing the operations you're here to do?
Okay.
So the first guy, mid-careerist, he was like, he had always been following the bureaucracy. He always had to do things a certain way. We came in with kind of a blank check and the freedom to create whole new operations. And he was all in, which was awesome. So we basically now have our first member of the cell outside of my wife and I. And that's how we started operating. So he would go collect on targets that he would identify, and then his reports would fall under my couriership, and then I would communicate the results back to CIA, and then bring new orders back from CIA, communicate that to the cell, and we would continue to operate that way.
Wasn't he already communicating that information to CIA?
No, because he was only communicating the information of the operations he was assigned to.
Oh, okay. So now he's collecting for you for something separate.
Correct.
And
Essentially,
you're able to pay him.
Well, you're getting confused between a CIA officer and an asset. He is a CIA officer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just a CIA officer assigned to that country already. I get that it's confusing. It's supposed to be confusing. That's why CIA uses the model. If you think of, take any three countries, right? Let's just say that you've got Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Slovakia, right? Three countries. All three of those countries have different levels of interest to the United States. But all three of those countries would have dedicated officers assigned to those countries to collect what is of interest in each of those countries. So in Azerbaijan and Armenia, maybe the conflict is, maybe part of what they're interested in is the secrets of the other country because there's a conflict between them.
Right.
And in Slovakia, what they're interested in is Russia, right? What's Russia's influence on Slovakia? So the officers in each of those countries are constantly collecting against the priorities of those countries. But because they're professional CIA officers, they can be relocated anytime. So maybe after 3 or 4 years, they all get rotated and now they're in France, Belgium, and Spain, right? But the point is, when someone like me travels to Slovakia, I'm not the only officer in Slovakia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm traveling there. There are already people there who speak the language, who have connections, who understand the area, and they're notified of my arrival, and I'm notified of a point of contact when I hit the ground so that we can deconflict operations so that I don't accidentally start talking to the same person he's talking to.
Right.
So everywhere you go in the world, you have to deconflict with who else is already there. So for us, when we arrived in Wolf, we already had to deconflict with everybody who was already there. So when we came up with our infrastructure to create this model, this cell that was going to live in Wolf, we thought to ourselves, the best place to start is with the officers who are already here. It's going to be way easier to recruit somebody into our cell, not into the CIA, but into our cell if they're already here.
Do you understand?
I think I understand, but do your bosses in the CIA allow you to recruit other officers off other operations to your own?
So
Right. I mean, because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this guy is an officer. He's
Yep.
already working for, let's say, the equivalent of the State Department in this other country, and he's gathering evidence on the Russians, what these guys know about the Russians and what their relationship with the Russians are. And then you're coming to him and you're
Yep.
saying, okay, I need you to start gathering information on what they have on
Falcon being the target country that we're trying to collect against.
Oh, okay, Falcon. Okay, on Falcon, and give us that information. Where to me, if I was him, I'd be like, if I'm gathering that information, why wouldn't I just give it directly to the CIA? I'm already working for him. But you're saying no, because he's been directed by the CIA to only give them information on Russia. And so for him to do extra work, he's already frustrated with the CIA. So he's like, why the fuck would I do extra work, give them extra stuff they're not asking for? Why wouldn't I just give it to you and let you provide that to them? But to me, I'd be like, but why am I doing that for you? Why wouldn't I do that? I would do that for you, but cut me some money, give me something for it, not just nothing, because, like I'm doing extra work.
So that's what's nice. What's nice is I get where you're coming from. It's not, when you're an officer and you're deployed, you have to meet certain requirements.
Right.
You have to meet certain production requirements. You have to produce a certain number of intelligence reports, for example. The person who gives you the credit for those intelligence reports it's a bureaucracy. So there's a reports officer who says you did XYZ number of reports. So let's say you have a quota. You have to do 30 reports in 30 days. Well, if you're the guy in Slovakia and you're collecting secrets about the criminal underworld of Slovakia, it might be really hard to come up with 30 intelligence reports in a month.
Right.
So that's why CIA says, hey, well, if you want to be promoted, you have to come up with 30 reports. Well, if you write 30 reports, you have to submit it to your bureaucracy. Your bureaucracy says only 15 of these count. Well, now you just missed your quota because of bureaucracy. We showed up and I was the one in charge of all the information. So I was like, hey, if you need 30 reports worth of quality to meet your criteria, I can give you 15 of those. I can award you in the criteria it takes to promote. So you can either keep chasing criminal underworld because that's what you've been assigned, or you can help us and we can give you credit for everything you create for us. And now you have better promotability. It's the equivalent of a paycheck, I guess, to some people. Yeah. But that was the power that we had in creating our new infrastructure.
Okay.
The difference is, the important thing there is everything's compartmentalized. So the 30 reports that you, Matt Cox, create, they don't get reported to CIA saying Matt Cox wrote these. They get reported to CIA saying Officer 289751 assigned to Slovakia wrote these. Well, nobody knows who that is except for the head of the station in Slovakia. So we were able to work the bureaucracy, which was part of our job, in order to create this new way of operating. So now we were able to have one officer who was frustrated because he wasn't getting credit for good work in this third world country, or in this third country. So we came in and we said, hey, do you want to do something fun and exciting with us? Because guess what? CIA is giving us lots of flexibility, lots of creativity, lots of funding to create something completely new. So if you want to come help us, you get to be part of this new thing and get credit for it. Or if you want to keep doing your old thing, we get it. Maybe you don't want to.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we talked to 5 or 6 officers very early on. The vast majority of them were like, no, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing now. I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to piss anybody off. I don't want to, make waves. But James, the first person that we talked to, James in the book, James was like, well, shit, I'll try that. That sounds fun.
Right. He's not getting anywhere on his own anyway. So he jumps on board. Do you get anybody else?
So James comes on board first, and then it's just the 3 of us for probably half a year. Because now what we have to do is prove the concept out. So Jihi, my wife, identifies targets. James goes out and meets those targets. And some of those targets are in Wolf because they have contacts back in Falcon. Sometimes he travels to Falcon, the actual adversary country to the United States. Sometimes he travels there in Alias and meets the targets that Jihi identified there. He's collecting and collecting and collecting. So his 30 report requirement, he's hitting 45, 50, 75 a month. So he's creating tons of production. I'm currying that production back to CIA. CIA is ecstatic. Wow, the two of you, we sent you and we told you to create something new and you're producing. This is awesome. Do more. So once we had the proof of concept, then we could start finding more people to be part of our cell. This was when we had the opportunity to start talking to people who were coming in brand new. So now, as new officers are on rotation, right, as they leave their previous country and come to Wolf to do a rotation in Wolf, we're able to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, we know you're here for counterterrorism. We know that you're here for counter proliferation. We know that you're here for counterintelligence. Would you also like to work with us? And in small numbers, we started building our team from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, until we had a sizable team. We had 8 people in our team that covered multiple different skill sets. Case officers who collected intelligence, targeters, tech officers, analysts, translators. We had a full suite of skills that were all just working in our little cell, doing just covert operations against Falcon with this terrorist model.
Okay. How long does it go on? And can I say, like, what information do you gather?
It's a sensitive question, right?
I'm already dancing around a bunch of sensitive questions, but I gotta start asking.
So the primary goal was to tap into plans and intentions for military, political, and industrial efforts at Falcon. When it comes to the world of geopolitics, you have 2 types of countries. You have non-competitive countries, and then you have near-peer competitive countries. Near-peer countries are the ones that we're the most worried about. Near-peer competitors are the countries that have sizable economies, sizable militaries, sizable nuclear programs, sizable cybersecurity programs. They're the countries that create the largest threat to the United States. You can really kind of count all of our near peers on one hand if you assume allies are not part of near-peer competitors.
Right.
When you realize that allies aren't really allies, now all of a sudden you see how our near-peer competitors kind of go through the roof. Because now Spain and France and Germany and Israel, they're all competitors. Saudi Arabia, UAE, all competitors, right? All near-peer. So you can see how the near-peer really takes off when you stop looking at people as friends and enemies. Mm-hmm. But the goal was to collect the plans and intentions for their militaries, for their politics, and for their infrastructure. And politics includes the intelligence services. That was what we were collecting on. So when Jihi would create her targeting packages, her dossiers that we would then send our case officers to go collect against, she's looking for people who are directly in the military or connected to the military. Here in the United States, we see that one of the vulnerabilities for military is our contractors. Mm-hmm. So she's doing the same thing there. Who are the uniformed military officers, but who are the highly placed contractors that are working military contracts? In politics, who are the politicians, but also who are the staffers, who are the advisors, who are the funders, right? Who are the bankers? And in infrastructure, who are the CEOs, who are the COOs, who are the big market movers? Identifying those people, collecting, creating a dossier, and then sending a case officer to go basically bump them, just like you said, only not at a Starbucks. You bump them at, their tennis club.
Do other countries use subcontractors for military work?
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was all kind of in-house, that we were, it just seems like a very capitalist model. I guess most countries, a lot of countries are capitalist in some form.
And keep in mind too, in the United States, we have at least we claim to have a distinction between government agency and commercial enterprise. Mm-hmm. Where in other countries, they're much more blended.
Yeah.
Right.
Like in China.
Yeah. So in China is a great example. You have the country owns the corporation. Mm-hmm. So then when the country needs something, they just give the contract to the corporation. Same way in Russia, very similar in Iran and China and North Korea. I mean, even in Europe, you've got places where the government is heavily invested in the infrastructure of the corporation. So then, of course, they partner together. Portugal's prime minister just got into all kinds of trouble because of that.
Mm. So how long does this go on before you know it's wrapped up, or does somebody else come in and take over where you're at? Because I mean, if you guys, if you guys just pack your bags and come back, then that whole infrastructure, that intelligence gathering operation, I guess, kind of just collapses, right? So does somebody else come in and then you guys kind of explain the whole thing, introduce them, hang out for 90 days, and then you take off? Or
Yeah, so the whole thing was supposed to be an experiment at first. So we didn't really have an end date in mind. What we learned, so fast forward about a year, after a year of proving our concept, we're having significant success. We have 5 case officers going and coming from Falcon, going and coming from other countries, collecting information that we didn't have before at CIA. I'm running that information back and forth to Langley. CIA is enthused about it. They're supportive. They like what we're doing. All of the senior CIA leadership at Wolf, because remember, we inserted ourselves into a country where there was already established operations. So the chiefs and deputy chiefs at Wolf like that they're getting more funding because we're getting more funding because CIA likes what we're doing. At the end of the day, it's all just it's a game for fiefdoms. It's all a game for money. Mm-hmm. If you have good operations, you get more money. If you have bad operations, they take your money away. So everybody's now happy about a year into this thing. We think that we're moving and shaking and everything's hunky-dory. Well, remember, there's a mole. And that mole wasn't something that we knew we were going to be used to essentially reverse engineer. So as we're running our operations, Langley's running their own completely separate operation to see who's snooping around, who's reaching beyond their controlled access to understand what's happening here.
To figure out where's all this information coming from.
Correct. And in that process, that's where they start to have what's known as a counterintelligence investigation or a spy hunt. And they're trying to find the mole because they know the mole will be interested in what we're doing, because the only way that the mole can find out what we're doing is if the mole finds the courier, which is me. So they're looking for one person who's trying to find information about me. About a year into this thing, we start having tons of success, and then everything shuts down. Everything meaning our cell continues to operate, but the country of Falcon transforms everything they're doing with their own people overseas. So all of our case officers who are meeting with Falconians, all of our Falcon contacts, all of our Wolf contacts who are working with Falconians, everything has like this wide transformation, and people stop talking to us. Our sources are no longer producing. They're not returning our phone calls. They're not. They're alive. We can see that they're alive because we can see them. We can track their cell phones, but they're not responding to invitations to come out anymore. So what changed? And it all happened at once. So we start to look into, did we screw up? Did the cell do something stupid? Did we get caught? Did we get discovered? And now Falcon intelligence is basically on to us. Or did one of us make a mistake and then policy changed across the board for everybody? We never got the complete answer there. But what it looks like happened is after a year, the mole at CIA didn't know who I was or what we were doing. So instead, he advised Falcon, there's something new happening.
All this information is being collected, and somebody's collecting it, and we're getting a ton of information on all these different types of things. So you have to do something to stop that leakage.
Correct.
Right?
So then Falcon just clamps down on everybody, right? And we're at a kind of a difficult inflection point because we can't collect because no one's talking. Mm-hmm. But we don't know why we can't collect, whether it's dangerous. Like if we send James into Falcon right now, is he going to get arrested?
Right.
If we send, one of our other case officers into Falcon, are they going to get wrapped up? We don't know. So we've got to kind of assess what we're going to do and how we're going to handle it. And what we decide is that we need to send somebody in who isn't actively committing espionage in that country. Because if you're not committing espionage, you can't be arrested on any fair and legal grounds.
Right.
Well, the only person in the cell who wasn't actively collecting secrets was me. So we decide to send me into Falcon to start running, operational support tasks, nothing that's overtly espionage, but it's a chance to see what's happening in Falcon. And when I go into Falcon, I fall under observation, I fall under surveillance. And then that kind of tips us off that something has gone wrong.
How do you know you just notice people are following you?
Well, you're trained to detect surveillance.
Right.
Yeah. So CIA teaches us what's known as a surveillance detection route, an SDR. And SDR training teaches you how to identify when you're under surveillance in multiple different locations. Again, I'm super excited because I get to teach surveillance detection in Shadow Cell. No one's ever had a chance to actually teach it in a book before. And we talk about it in such a way that we teach it to the people who read the book. So I can talk about the route that I took and how I took it and who identified it, why I identified them, all through the story that we actually tell in Shadow Cell. But long story short is when I realize I'm under observation, for me personally, it becomes very, very real. It's not just like a theoretical game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, holy shit, I'm in a fake identity in a foreign country that's very powerful because it's an adversary to the United States. And I know I'm under surveillance. So I have to run this surveillance detection route in a certain way so that I don't tip off that I know I'm under surveillance. But at the same time, I have to collect as much information as I can, never really knowing if they already know everything about me. Do they already know who I am and what I'm doing there because the mole has tipped them off? Is this all just them kind of collecting on me before they choose to wrap me up at the airport or at the grocery store or in my hotel room? And it's a very stressful period.
What do you do? Do you stay there for like a week or 2 weeks, and once you realize this, do you leave, or do you hang out for another 2 weeks?
Yeah. So the general,
you run screaming from the hotel, doing the windmill,
The general strategy is not to do that. Yeah, the general strategy.
That's my strategy. That's what I would do.
That's all good. So I know not to build alias with you, and I know not to.
They're on us.
Not to tell you when you're being followed. So our strategy, when we identify that we're under surveillance, it's a process that we call lulling surveillance. So lulling surveillance means that you try to act in such a way that's so predictable and boring and dull that surveillance, essentially the actual people watching you,
drop their guard,
get bored. They
Right.
drop their guard. They stare at their cell phone more than they stare at you. They read their book instead of watching the door. Like, that's what you want them to do. So I go into a lulling process to try to lull this surveillance to sleep.
If you sleep hot at night, you know how disruptive that can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above. That's where Ghost Bed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, Ghost Bed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts to your body's temperature, every Ghost Bed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firm option with exceptional support, your Ghost Bed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items are shipped within 24 hours. If you're not sure which Ghost Bed is right for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get a personalized recommendation. Even better, our listeners will get 10% off for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/Cox and use code Cox at the checkout. That's ghostbed.com/Cox and use code Cox for 10% off site-wide.
While also trying to maintain my situational awareness to identify if I'm actually lulling them or if they're just backing off the A team to get ready to move in the snatch team, right? So that's what I'm doing. I was originally supposed to be there for a 3-day collection trip, meaning 3 days of operational support collection activities. I identified that I was under surveillance about halfway through the first day. Then I took them on essentially what we call a rabbit run. So about an 8 to 12 hour circuitous route of boring chores to draw them out so I could observe them as much as possible without them identifying that I was observing them. In that 12-hour route, I made the decision that I needed to get out of the country as soon as possible, because when you're under surveillance, every minute that you're there is a chance for the home team to bring in more resources. So I needed to find a way to leave before they could bring in more resources. So I opted to leave early. So in the book, I detail how I go through that process and how we make that decision and how I ultimately, communicate back to my team that I'm going to be coming back early. And that whole process, you never know if it's going to work or not. So it was a kind of stressful 36 hours. But ultimately, I ended up at the airport, and I had made the decision and the commitment. I'm just going to get on a plane and I'm going to leave. I'm going to cross the border and leave.
That's the worst part right there. Being at the airport, because if they don't know what's happening, and suddenly you go to the airport, they're going,
yep,
well, we got to grab him. Like if we're going to grab him now, if we're going to grab him at all, we got to grab him now because this guy's he's bolting.
Exactly. So when you think about how to get out of a country, you have to think about land, sea, or air. And then depending on whether you want land, sea, or air, you then have to think about how you're going to get across land, sea, or air. Truck or foot, boat that you charter, boat that you steal, large like commercial boat that you hire. Air, are you going to fly out on a plane in coach class? Are you going to hire a small puddle jumper? Like how are you going to escape? And what are the ramifications if you do that? Because you're under surveillance. So the surveillance team is going to go with you wherever you choose to go. So if you go to a ferry or if you go to a cruise ship or if you go to a large airport or a small airport, they're coming with you unless you take the provocative action of trying to ditch them. Mm-hmm. And if you take a provocative action and ditch them, then the cat's out of the bag. They know to suspect you even more because you have ditched them. So when I ran all these kind of calculations through my head, I landed on a commercial airport, especially an airport I was already scheduled to fly out of. I left a large digital footprint saying, hey, I'm changing my flight, sent multiple emails, made multiple phone calls, because I assume if they're watching me, they're watching my cell phone. Like the whole world, I let them all know I'm leaving early on this flight. The flight leaves in 12 hours. Here's my new updated ticket. Sent my ticket to like 3 different people, all under my same cover organization, in the hopes that it would all get scooped up by their signals intelligence and then it would be communicated back to their team. It turns out they may not have been as sophisticated as we thought. So I get to the airport and I get pulled into secondary immediately after they see my passport. And they're like, oh, you're leaving early. We see a change in your ticket. You're going into secondary. We have people who want to talk to you. And then I go into an interrogation. We detail it all in the book, but in the interrogation, we find out that all of my concerns about them having a well-coordinated intelligence service seemed like they were either just as effective as the United States, where bureaucracy and human kind of motivation were lacking, or maybe I was just smarter than them. I don't know which, but the investigators, the interrogators were not aware of my previous activities. At least it didn't seem like they were.
And so what, they just gave you, well, why, what's going on? You came here for, why are you leaving? Do they know you're leaving early?
They know we're leaving early. They know I'm leaving early, and they know that my passport's been flagged because that's how I got into secondary. But what happens, because the interrogation happens in broken English. Mm-hmm. I speak English. I don't speak Falconian. And they don't speak very much English, but they speak enough that they got called in to be the interrogators. So there's all this dialogue between me and the interrogators, but there's also all this dialogue between the interrogators. And they're arguing with each other, which was very interesting to me. When you go through interrogation training at CIA, you learn certain rules to have a very effective controlled interrogation. As a simple example, one of the first rules that you learn is that when you put somebody in the interrogation room, you leave them there. Let the room do the work for you. Because their anxiety is up, their stress is up, they don't know what they're there for, they don't know how long they'll be there. In a place like an airport, they already are, am I going to miss my flight? Am I going to catch my flight? You can make the room hot or cold. You can keep them from a bathroom. You can keep them from food. So you can control the room, but you have to let them sit in that room for a while. They didn't let me sit in that room for a long time. So right away, I saw that their methodology for interrogating me was different than the best practices that I had learned at CIA. And as I saw that their methodology was less efficient, less professional than ours, it kind of gave me more and more confidence that maybe I was going to get through this thing.
So eventually they just say, all right, you're good. And you leave. I mean,
yes.
I don't know why, for some reason, the scene from
another movie.
Yeah, of course. Everything I know is from the movies or TikTok. Is the movie? I want to say it was. I I want to say it was Transformers, where it's the black guy. Maybe it's not that, but there was a black guy. He's a comedian, and there's a white chick, and they leave him in a room, and they're waiting. They put some cookies in the room, and he's eating the cookies. He's like, but they wait and they wait and they wait, and then when they finally walk, he's telling her like basically like, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna get through this. Like I'm not gonna talk. I'm not gonna this and that. But as soon as they walk in, he's like, it was her. She made me do everything. He breaks immediately. What was that? It was hilarious. So anyway, that's the picture I see of you waiting in the room, and then when they walk in, you go, okay. No.
I'm doing for more cookies.
You got me. See, now I'm afraid to bring up movies, but anyway, because there's so many good movies. You know, one of my favorite scenes from a movie is Argo.
Oh,
which was the scene where they're pitching the ideas on how to get these guys out of it's Iran, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to get them out of Iran, and they're saying, and he's like, "This is the best plan you have." They're telling the director, and he's like, okay, he's like, no, he goes, this is a good plan or something like. He's like, no, all we have is bad plans.
Right.
He goes, so this is the best bad plan you have. Yes, this is the best of all the bad plans.
Correct.
I was just thinking, fucking great. Like there's no good plans here. There's no good situation, but this is the best of the bad situations.
And you got to remember, CIA is what we call an agency of last resort.
Right.
If it could have been done any other way.
Yeah.
Somebody else would have done it. The military would have done it. The Department of State would have done it. The Homeland Security would have done it. Health and Human Services would have done it. Somebody else would have done it.
Right.
By the time it comes to us,
it's a last resort.
It's all bad ideas.
Yeah.
So we're throwing lots of bad ideas, just trying to find a way to make the worst idea a little bit less bad.
You know what's disappointing about your story here?
Lots, I'm sure.
There's no gunfight.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't duct tape you to a chair. They what was the Casino Royale where he's stripped naked and the guy's beating? He's hitting his nuts with the thing and God, it was horrible.
That was horrible.
Yeah, which is it's good for you because it doesn't seem like something that'd be great to go through, but. Yeah, but really, it seems like it's just what the CIA is really designed for, which is just supposed to gather information so that if it gets to a point where where the president or somebody in the government needs to know what's going on, you can say, okay, this plane was built by this company who was run by these people so that you know everything. And, this is a time when you don't have Google and websites to scour anything. This is, that's typically, where they're gathering all this information and all the backstories and who's vulnerable and who's not vulnerable. But everybody thinks the CIA is James Bond and, who's
Jason Bourne.
Jason Bourne. Yeah. Or what's the other one? It was come on, Red October, the movie Red October. He was a CIA office. He was a CIA. He just wrote books for the CIA or something right? And he ends up being thrown in the field, and that's a great concept too, because he's doing what I was thought what really the CIA is supposed to be doing, was just gathering information. They happen to throw him out in the field, and next thing you know, he's like, "Fuck, I'm not an officer. I'm not supposed to be out here doing this stuff." So
the story is real.
Yeah,
and that's what.
Well, it's like police work. Police work, you only see the police work where they're having gunfights and car chases. But the truth is, every cop you talk to is like, listen, it's 99% paperwork and boredom with these moments of complete adrenaline. Situations where you're pulling the gun or somebody's shooting at you, or suddenly there's a car there. But the bulk of it is paperwork and sitting around.
And that's what a government job is.
Yeah.
And I think espionage is enjoyable. I think it is exciting. I think it is sexy because it's all a game of deception. If you are successful, nobody even knows you were there.
Right.
If you fail, they shoot at you, they put you in fisticuffs, and they throw you in jail. Like, you want to avoid all of the action scenes from a movie as much as possible. And I understand that it's disappointing.
Unless it's the Mossad. They seem like they're always getting into some shit. Remember they killed that they killed some terrorist leader or something. They caught them all on film where they're walking in the bathroom, changing disguise, going back out and then after the guy ends up dead, this was like 10 years ago or something like that. God, that was like it was just something straight out of a movie. But apparently they didn't know there was cameras.
Yeah, they shouldn't have gotten
out
caught.
of all your research. Like, yeah, you guys got out of the country, but boy, they put it together quick with the cameras.
Well, I mean, you got a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, Mossad is a completely different beast than CIA, right? Mossad is the intelligence service and the paramilitary intelligence service of a country that's surrounded by
enemies,
existential enemies that want it destroyed. That's not the United States.
No.
We sit comfortably on the side of two different oceans. We've got Canada and Mexico to worry about.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we have a completely different threat profile than Israel does. And then on top of that, we have the largest budget, the most sophisticated military, the best equipment. We don't have to show off our capability. If anything, we want to hide our capability. Mossad has to do a bit of both.
Yeah.
They have to show their capability in order to intimidate aggressors against taking action against Israeli people. But then they also have to hide part of their capability so they can still surprise people. That's how you end up having exploding pagers, and that's how you have them launching drones from inside Iran, because they have to show off a little bit, but they still want to hide their future capability.
What about that Ukrainian drone strike on the Russians? That was some shit, right?
There have been several, but yeah.
No, I'm talking about the one where they took out all their like long range bomb. Not all of them. They took out like like 60%
the majority
or
of them.
And the Russians are like, oh, those were old planes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was something else. Like, and that was where they just had 18 wheelers come in. They thought they were moving like mobile homes in, and then told them, no, go here and someone will pick it up here. Just drop it off here. And they pull up. They're right next to naval base or right next to air bases. And next thing you know, they pop open and the drones go out and they start slamming into the thing. Like that was insane. That was super interesting.
And that's also an area of open hostilities.
Yeah,
so open hostilities is, again, you're getting more and more like the movies when you start getting into areas of significant threat, areas of open war. That is the inspiration that becomes Hollywood movies, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that happens in the shadows, there's a reason nobody makes movies about that stuff, right? Because it's methodical and it's systematic and it's professional. There's a reason nobody makes movies about how hospitals actually work. There are no TV shows about how actual surgical wings work. Instead, they make TV shows about like highly dramatic hospitals and highly dramatic court cases and highly dramatic stuff that just doesn't happen in real life.
Well, the Aldrich Ames thing, it's like he had a very boring career that was wiping out dozens, if not 100 agents.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, and it's all just paperwork. They've made that movie a couple of different times.
Yep.
They tried to make it exciting.
Yeah.
But it's not exciting, but you don't realize like with a just putting a note and a piece of paper under a bench and walking away, and he's doing all these things. And just people are just getting picked up left and right in the Soviet Union at the time and being executed, including their own people, right? So Americans and assets.
Yeah, and Robert Hansen was doing the same thing for FBI, and there's another great example, right? So CIA was very invested in finding and hunting and neutralizing the mole that they had within the agency because they know what Aldrich Ames was able to do.
Right.
They know what Robert Hansen was able to do. They know what Eva Montez was able to do when she worked at DIA. They know the damage that these moles can do. So when you have to pick between identifying and neutralizing a mole versus letting them just continue to run while you hopefully collect enough evidence over time, it's a no-brainer. They have to find a way to aggressively capture that person. And in the United States, this is both the strength and the weakness of the United States. That mole inside CIA is an American citizen.
Right.
So they're given all the rights and privileges of an American until they're taken to a court of law in front of a panel of their peers, a jury of their peers, and then they are given the assumption that they are innocent until proven guilty. So even though you know that person's operating, you know there's a mole, you have a suspect or 5 suspects, you can't do anything. You can't fire them, you can't put them on administrative leave, you can't do anything. You have to let them keep doing what they're doing until all of it is said and done, which is how Russia and China and Iran are able to come in and kind of scoop their American assets out, because we have this period of time between when you're identified and when you're actually convicted. And anytime in that window, you can be pulled out and saved by the person that you're working for.
So speaking of pulled out, so when you come back and you're now in, was it Falcon?
Wolf.
You're now in Wolf with your wife. Do you guys get word? I mean, you now know something's wrong.
Correct.
Do you guys you pass that up the chain of command? Do they come back and say, okay, we're gonna come grab you at tomorrow night? Or
so one of the reasons that we're in Wolf is because we're safer in Wolf than we would be in Falcon.
Right.
So by successfully leaving Falcon, I get to a safe haven in Wolf, and we report everything up to CIA. We report everything to our cell itself. And then we go through a very detailed, what's known as a counterintelligence scrub. And that scrub is a giant investigation that we run internally and that CIA runs from Langley. We run this CI scrub to see, where did the breakdown happen? Can we isolate the mistake that led to the surveillance operation against a known, like what we know is a known trained CIA officer? How did Falcon Intelligence find us? How did they find me? So we scrub all the cases in Wolf. Langley scrubs all the cases that they've been tracking, that we've been touching, and we all come to the same conclusion that there was no identifiable mistake at Wolf. Our operations were sound. All of our officers continue to report no surveillance activities. Our tech scrubs show that nobody's being collected against. There's been no external vectors coming into our tech. So it seems like we're still solid. It seems like the modus operandi, the cell that we created, is doing what it's supposed to do. It put me in the courier position, the most vulnerable position, to be a tripwire so that if I became someone of interest, everybody else would know that I'm of interest and they're still safe. And that's exactly what we were able to identify in the back end.
So what happens?
I can't go back to Falcon, but they still need to continue operating. So the cell continues to execute. They bring in someone new to be the new courier. We train that person how to handle a cell operation. CIA actually pulls me back and starts having me train new operators all over the world how to create cells of their own. So from that moment forward, we start building cells in other areas of interest all over the world, basically recreating our little group in other countries.
Your wife leaves too.
My wife goes along with me. Well, we're still at CIA.
Yeah.
But now we're traveling and we're essentially trainers, training people in our methodology. Some officers pick it up. They like it. Some officers don't like changing the old way of doing business. So we don't really know what the success rate is. At the same time that we're training other cells, we find out that we're pregnant.
Okay.
And we come to the personal decision ourselves that we would rather raise a family than build a career at CIA. So we choose to leave CIA. We go on to raise our family. And then a few years later, we see in the headlines that our model, our cell model, is now being applied to the entire CIA. There's a complete restructure of CIA under Director John Brennan. And the whole agency is transformed.
Okay, well, when do you realize that they had only put you out there as bait?
When the mole is captured. So the mole
happen?
The mole's captured in 2019-ish.
Oh, so you've been gone.
We've been gone for a while. And when the mole is captured, we see it come across the justice.org or justice.gov site, because we always track espionage cases. We see that this person who fits the mold was captured. We start to research that person, and we start to see from the evidence trail that FBI created that person slammed into our operation at the time that we were in Wolf. And that became part of the evidence trail that led to their arrest.
Okay.
That's when we became aware of it. Now, when we wrote the manuscript and we submitted the manuscript to CIA, that they verified it for us. They were the ones that were like, you can't talk about this because what you're saying here happened. That's why it's classified. And that was kind of when it all came together.
Right.
We were
So
like,
before you were putting the pieces together, you're like, this makes perfect sense. But
Right.
now you actually have verification.
And classification.
Right. You and your wife, you're kind of out. One of the issues we talked about this last time. One of the issues you had was when you guys left, because almost nobody ever leaves, is that they didn't really know how to set you up to leave and be successful, where they weren't willing to give you a cover story.
Yeah, they don't care about setting you up to be successful afterwards. And CIA wasn't happy with us that we were leaving. We had just finished this operation. We had just built a whole new model for operations that were secure.
And you're helping to train people on this,
Correct.
on the new model.
And then it's not just one of us leaving, it's both of us leaving. So both the architects of this program are now walking out the door at a time when CIA didn't have people walking out the door. So the last thing they wanted to do was help us. And they didn't even really have an administrative process for dealing with younger officers choosing to leave. They had a retirement process, and they had a process for firing people who, had affairs, were alcoholics, et cetera, et cetera. They had a process for people who were malcontent, but they didn't have a process for good people who just chose to choose a different path. So we go through and we submit our resignation. They tell us they can't process a resignation, but they can process a leave without pay. So when we go to quit CIA, they actually ask us, please don't quit, because we don't have a process for that. But we do have a process to put you on 6 months of leave without pay. And then at the end of that 6 months, if you just don't come back to work, then we'll process you as a resignation. We have that process. So I go to my wife and I tell her the same thing. I was like, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other for us. We still get to leave. They still won't give us they'll never really acknowledge our affiliation, but we can leave. And it's just administratively 2 different sheets of paper. So we leave, we relocate to Florida. We have no work history that can be validated for almost 7 years, or for almost 8 years. So we leave, we have all of our credentials from before CIA, and then we have this block of cover activity because we're required by law. We're still undercover. Even though we're leave without pay on our way out, they haven't rolled back our cover, meaning they haven't gone through the process of exploring our operations and telling us what we can and can't say, blah, 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 blah. So we're still CIA officers by law and commitment, but we're not being paid. And CIA will no longer offer us backstopping for our cover, and will no longer give us anything. So we have this situation where we can't get a job because we can't verify our employment, because if you call the number on our resume, it's an empty phone line to a fake business or a fake office somewhere with nobody answering the phone anymore. So we can't find a job for like 6 months, and I'm living in my parents' my in-laws' converted garage in fucking Tampa, Florida, feeling like a loser, man, because there's no hope. And my wife is there, and my 1-year-old child is living in a fucking playpen on the floor of a converted garage, a cement floor in Florida. I mean, anybody who's been down here knows what that feels like.
Yeah.
You don't feel like a winner when you're in that situation.
Right. So, how long, how do you get out of that? I mean, I know I would have gotten out of it immediately. I'd have faked everything. Somebody would have answered the phone. There would have been a website, business cards.
So when we left CIA, we both thought we had to create like a completely new life. So our life of lying and faking and fabricating was over, and now we had to start this new square life. Mm-hmm. So we tried to do everything by the books, and we tried to find the right resume, and we tried to polish it as best we could, and we went to all the networking meetings, and we put our resume on all the right channels. And, this was early 2014 that we're trying to figure this whole thing out.
But you still have a huge gap.
But we still have a huge gap, and it kind of dawns on us in the moment of need, like after 6 months of fucking Florida summer in a converted garage. It kind of clicks, and we're like, we've been trying to play fair, but all of our success came from being trained how not to play fair. So what if we just started kind of borrowing some skills from CIA and using it to find a job? So my wife targeted an executive in Florida. I bumped that executive in Florida. We already knew that that person had a job. That was an opening. They had a need. They were looking for people that were going to be able to, the position that they had was a high turnover position because it was high stress and people didn't want to deal with that shit in a growing company. So we already knew all this. So then when we talked to the actual person, when I met the person, I was able to ingratiate myself using CIA skills to win their trust and win their support and win their affection, whatever else, by making myself a perfect fit for this job opening that they had this problem filling. So before long, it was an easy conversation. The person was like, I got this job that you might be perfect for. Tell me about that job, and blah, 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 blah. And I would love to apply.
I happen to be in need of a job.
You don't even have to apply. I'll just connect you right to the hiring manager. And if you think it's a good fit, you're in. You mean no one's going to call my resume? No one's going to verify my employment? Like, I'm down for that. So two meetings and a phone call later, I get a job offer to work for CVS Health when it was growing in 2015. And I'm brought on as a business analyst doing a bunch of quantitative analysis, which I had no experience in whatsoever, but CIA taught me how to learn shit fast.
All right.
So I started learning how to be a business analyst as quickly as I could.
It's got to be a YouTube video.
Not back then.
For that.
But yeah, and then we just kind of climbed the ladder. What I found is that once you're in a corporate setting, all of these skills that CIA taught you for how to live and operate undercover become incredibly valuable. You can learn things faster. You can memorize faster. You can remember for longer. You learn how to kind of capitalize on persuasion and influence in the workplace with your coworkers and your bosses and the people who work beneath you and the people in other offices. And all of a sudden, you just have incredible amounts of success. So my wife and I both get into CVS Health, and we both start to climb the ladder in like record pace because we don't know what the fuck we're doing. We've never worked in pharmacy before, but we're able to climb the ladder because we have all these soft skills and these shortcut skills that allow us to really understand the battlefield faster than the average person.
Well, so how long does that go on? And when did you, because at some point you start a podcast.
Yeah. So it's funny. I am known for podcasting. Podcasting is the smallest amount of money I make. Right. Which is, for me, I think it's hilarious. It gets the least amount of my time and it's the smallest amount of money I make. But my after 2.5 years where we're promoted every 6 months, I mean, I go from leaving CIA. I leave CIA in 2014 making $91,000 a year in Washington, D.C. I get hired in Tampa, Florida, working 100% remote for a growing company. I make $80,000 a year. Now, $80,000 a year in Tampa goes a shit ton farther than $91,000 in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And then every 6 months, I'm promoted. My wife is promoted about every 9 months just because of the different job categories. So after 2 years, I went from being a business analyst to being an advisor to a Fortune 13 company, right? I'm making $120,000 a year plus 25% annual bonus in stocks. Like it's way more money than I ever thought I would ever be making. And then I'm living in Florida where that money goes super far. And it clicks on my head that I wasn't skilled. Like, I'm not great at business analytics. That's not how I climbed the ladder. I climbed the ladder because I knew how to make my boss like me and my boss's boss like me and then get picked first for the job. Like, I kind of cheated the system. And I cheated the system with spy techniques that anybody can learn. So then I just wondered, well, what if I just teach these techniques to other people? Like, won't I make more money teaching these to other people rather than sitting here and working 12 or 16 hours a day in the grind of a daily job? And my wife was supportive, and that's when we launched our business, Everyday Spy. So our business was launched in 2019. Very shortly thereafter, we started creating YouTube videos, just little videos to experiment with how to even create YouTube. You and I were talking off camera. I was literally making videos on my Android phone. Shitty videos, no edits, no cuts, no good lighting. Like, anybody goes to my channel and looks at the oldest videos is going to see some trash, right? But that's where we start. So I started doing that on YouTube and I started launching my business. And then my business actually started gaining the most support early on from entrepreneurs and from corporations, because they wanted me to come in and teach their people how to speak to each other, teach communication, teach leadership skills, teach techniques that CIA was using for risk management, for sales, for marketing, for for leadership development, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of our early sales came from corporate clients, and using that money, we spun that money into creating courses for the everyday person and creating a whole digital back end so people can log into our private library. They can go into our private learning system. We built all that infrastructure on our own. So Everyday Spy started to grow. My podcast, my YouTube channel started to grow. But what ended up happening is war broke out in 2022 with the invasion of Ukraine. And I was one of the few voices that had a YouTube channel at all that was talking about how CIA actually works. So Lex Friedman, one of the larger podcasters at the time, had a conversation with me, and that's when YouTube, the whole YouTube viral world kind of blew up for me.
Yeah, you've got shorts on Julian. I don't know what they are on Lex. I mean, I saw the Lex, but it was Julian's. I mean, obviously I knew you before that, but it was some of Julian's shorts on you. I mean, 45 million views. I mean, they're out. I mean, I don't know if they're higher than that, but I know at least
I think his largest is over 300 million views.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And that's when, so Julian Dory, if people don't know him, is 100% a podcaster to check out. I think he might be the most underrated podcaster.
I know he is
airing
because
right
he'll
now.
tell you.
But he does great stuff.
He does. And listen, he'll take a minute and a half short, and it's like a documentary.
For real.
They're phenomenal. He knows it. He's the same guy like the guys in the UK. Like, it can't be longer than exactly 2 seconds. And you have to do this. You have to show movement. That doesn't have movement. We have to have movement. Make sure the eyes line up with the eyes when you, I mean, it's like, bro, like he could write a 300-page book on how to do the perfect short.
Right.
They're phenomenal.
And the numbers prove it, right?
Yeah.
So Julian, it was Julian and Danny Jones who found me first. I interviewed with both of them. We had great interviews, great conversations, and that just kind of springboarded me onto more and more of the bigger shows. But what's wild is, as I've grown this kind of YouTube presence, the real value for me has been that all these lives who find me on YouTube then go into my business, and then I get to change their lives in the business. So we've had people that we've turned from employees into entrepreneurs. We have people who were making $40,000 a year that are now making $140,000 a year, and they have tons of success because the skills work, and the skills are teachable, and the skills are simple enough to learn.
Are these like video courses?
We have video courses. We have audio. We have books. We have workbooks. We have in-person training courses. Everything that CIA, and there's more coming all the time, because everything CIA trained into us that isn't classified, we get to train into other people, and there's nobody else out there doing it.
Did you go to somebody? Did you just create your own courses, or did you actually go to, like, you know who Brad Lee is?
No.
Yeah, he's got a whole studio designed. Like, he does. I would say Tony. Is it Tony? Is it Anthony? Does he go by Tony or Anthony Robbins?
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. Okay, Tony Robbins. He does Tony Robbins. He does who else? Grant Cardone. He does, like, I don't think he does Grant. I don't know if he does Grant anymore. He does a bunch of, like, all the really huge ones. He's out in Las Vegas. And he's got a huge thing, and he's got, like, people that answer the phones for you. He's got a whole system set up. So, I mean, I'm sure you're doing fine, but if you might want to at least have a conversation with him, because listen, I'm not impressed by a lot of people's setups when you walk into the place. Listen, man, this place, you're like, this is, of course, if you got Tony Robbins as one of your clients, you're probably making bank.
Yeah.
But yeah, matter of fact, he's got Luke. I can't remember. I'll butcher Luke's last name. Whatever. Remember the big Luke Luckenheim?
Yeah.
The big
Bank
guy.
robber.
Yeah, the bank robber. Anyway, he's got he does Luke's. Yeah, he's really good. You ought to think about talking to him unless you're perfectly happy where you're at. Anyway, so yeah, so you're doing that now, and then you had a TV show. What happened with the TV show?
I mean, we do a lot with A&E Networks, with History Channel, and I've been part of their Beyond Skinwalker project for 2 years now.
Beyond
Skinwalker. So it's a high strangeness research study, which is basically it's kind of an all-encompassing term that starts talking about where modern day science meets the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that's UFOs, sometimes that's energy orbs, sometimes that's UFOs, sometimes it's like alien cryptids. It's all that kind of space that people try to explore, but applying real science to it. So Beyond Skinwalker's on History Channel. It's part of the Skinwalker Ranch investigation that's going on through the sister channel, the sister show called The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. Been doing that for about 2.5 years now. And then Shadow Cell, the book that we've been discussing, has sold rights to Legendary Films.
Oh, the option, the film rights?
Correct. So whether or not that gets flipped into a film or a TV show, they're still working through right now. But along with the book publication on September 9th, we're also expecting to make progress towards some kind of film media.
So, okay. Are they thinking feature film, or are they thinking series? Or
they're thinking, I mean, I think they're thinking TV series.
Yeah.
But it's so early in the process, I don't know that they know whether it's a 3-season arc, a 1-season arc, a 9-season show, a 4-season show, a miniseries, or whether they flip it back to their parent organization and it goes feature film. And we've talked about this too. Yeah. Like, media is a really fickle world.
Yeah, yeah. Or if it just the option expires in 18 months and they couldn't put it together, and then Paul bumps into Larry at a party in 2 years from now, and they call you up and they say, we think we got something here. And 3 months later, you're shooting a fucking film because two guys bumped into each other. Like, the way it works is so bizarre. It's like, Bob's cousin was talking about possibly doing something on Spies 2 months ago, and let me call him. And they call it. 2 phone calls later, you're signing a contract with Warner Brothers. You're like, I went 18 months pitching 7 different production companies with all the main players, and 2 guys bump into each other in a party and put it together. That's why you'll go to the movies and see a movie and go, how the fuck did this get made? Yeah. And then other stories that are phenomenal. You're like, why is this not a film? Why isn't this a series? Because Tom didn't go to the party. He wasn't golfing that day. That's the problem, is you just don't know how it doesn't work the way you think it works.
Yeah. It's
you can see how frustrated I am, because I've been through this process for 5 years.
You and I met in the middle of this process. You and I met when you were writing a book. And it wasn't your first book, but it was one of your many. Yeah. Either way, what I've learned through the media process, right? Through the podcasting process, the TV History Channel process, the book writing process, the publishing process, the optioning your film. This is not a business where people get rich.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The richest people out there, all of your A-list celebrities, your A-list directors, your A-list, you name the wealthy, famous fucking celebrity that comes to your mind. They did not get wealthy being in the film. They did not get wealthy writing the script for the film. They got wealthy because they were able to flip what little money they had into producing high-performing films. Yeah. Right? That's how they did it. That's why your Ben Affleck is so wealthy and your Tom Cruise is so wealthy. Not because they were in it, but because they produced it. Yeah. And then they end up taking a huge portion of all of the sales.
Well, the first thing they do when these guys make a chunk of money, when they get some money, they end up getting $5 or $6 million. First thing they do is open a production company. Because you can imagine how many people are coming up to them at the party saying, listen, you got to hear this story. And, so yeah,
they have an idea of what it's like to be on the
now they know.
Inside.
And now they're Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise can get the meeting.
Yeah.
Where most people can't even get the meeting to pitch the amazing story. He can get that meeting.
Yeah.
And he can also help to move it along much faster, because he can say, hey, by the way, I want to play the FBI agent. And they're like, oh, wow, right? Tom Hanks. Hey, by the way, I'll play the FBI agent and Catch Me If You Can. Yeah. There's so many of those films that take forever, and then you notice it's like same thing. Ben Affleck, I'll play the CIA agent in Argo. Argo was actually an article called "The Great Escape," which was in Wired magazine, which got bought by Matt Damon, and he, after about a year or so, he just couldn't do it, and so he mentions it to Ben Affleck. Is it
Affleck.
Affleck, okay.
Affleck is the insurance company.
Yeah, Affleck. Yeah,
Affleck is the actor.
Ben mentioned it to Ben, and Ben said, "I'll take it."
Yep.
And he ended up making the movie, and they called it Argo, which is one of my favorite films because my understanding is I watched a doc on it on kind of like the thing is it's so similar with the exception of one or two things that they tweaked. You know, like the plane's taking off and the cars are driving next to them. They're trying to get the plane down. Like somebody in the tower wouldn't say, "Yo, go ahead and power down." You know, that didn't happen. You know, instead they've got and when they stop them at the airport and question it. Like they did a few scenes to make it a little bit more exciting at the end. Other than that, you know, it was super accurate, and I loved the period. It was a period piece, and the whole thing. I thought that movie I thought it was really well done.
I mean, that's saying something from somebody who's borderline OCD like you.
Yeah,
every detail, you're seeing them all.
Yeah, it upset. Yeah, there's stuff that upsets me. We've talked about it.
I think just the crazy eyes that you had for whoever edits this thing, you got to play back the crazy eyes once we talked about OCD on you because it was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, there's some issues. There's a lot of me straightening things and straightening it.
Was that pre-prison, in prison, after prison?
I feel like it was. I feel like it might have been before prison. I know there are guys that
you were so good at what you did criminally that you had to be super detail oriented.
I think I know that there are guys that become kind of, you know, clean freaks and OCD after going to prison and being in that environment. I've heard that. I've actually heard that from my original probation officer. Because the first place I moved into was so just kind of trashed, and she was like, "Are you going to be okay here?" And you know, she said a lot of guys they just can't. It's like, I'm renting that back room. I'm not going in this area. I'm just going to stay in the back room. It had a separate entrance. It was. When does the book come out?
September 9th.
Who's the publisher?
So our publisher is Little Brown. Little Brown is an imprint under Hachette, the top 5 global publisher. Hachette's a French publisher. And if we've
Did they contact you, or do you have a literary agent?
I had a literary agent that connected us. Yeah, and speaking of which, like the friend of a friend of a friend, that's how I found the literary agent, right?
Yeah, it's hard to find a literary agent.
A friend connected me to this guy in LA who was plugged into film. I talked to that guy. He was like, "You've got a great story, but you need a book agent. Let me connect you to this other friend who I know who's got book agents." And then 4 phone calls later, I'm talking to the guy who became my book agent. He was like, "I love your story, and I think it could be a film." So everybody wanted a film. But they're like, you got to do the book first. Yeah. So then we did the book first. We'll see what comes of it because, like I said, it's a shit show, right? It's a total shit show. You never know who's going to like what or when they're going to like it or why they're going to like it. So I don't know where you learned to write a story because I'm just now starting to get into the whole process of story writing. And there's an actual recipe for a story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm just slow to the party or if everybody realized this, but like, the scenes in a book, the moments that you choose to actually record in a film, whatever it might be, like there's beats, there's process, there's purpose, there's craft that goes into building it from beginning to end so that people go on a journey and so that they don't lose interest and so they have emotional highs and lows. I've never taken the time to think about it until I started working on the adaptations of our book into TV and movie with different screenwriters. And it's a really fascinating process. And it's so complicated. It's not so complicated. It's so crafty, meaning like there's an actual craft to it. It's so crafty that if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, you're not going to succeed. Not everybody can actually create a story. Mm-hmm. How did you learn to create a story?
I mean, I wrote my story when I was locked up, and I read several books.
About storytelling?
About how to write and about writing, and I mean it's funny too, because the books that I bought were like, how to write memoirs for dummies, how to write true crime, or not how to write true. It was The Idiot's Guide to Writing True Crime or Nonfiction. That sort of thing.
I remember those. Yeah, those for dummies and idiots guides.
And probably the best book I got was some guy who knew I was writing my story, walked by me, and he said, "Hey man, I saw this book you might want." And he handed me this book, and I'm telling you, it was this big. I remember it had a sailboat on the cover, and it just looked like, it was like probably maybe 100 pages. I can't even remember what it was. It was tiny, and it was from a woman who'd actually written like 2, maybe 3 memoirs.
Huh.
And reading that book probably taught me more than all these other books, because just these little things she said that I understood for the first time was like, get into a scene as late as possible and get into it as early as possible. And then she would give like a little example where it's like, you don't say, I walked across the parking lot and got in my car, opened the door, got in my car, turned on the radio, and as I was listening to the radio, the news came on, and that's when I found out my wife had been murdered. You don't do that. What you say is, I'm in the car listening to the radio when the radio announcer came on and said, boom, so-and-so's, had just died. You see what I'm saying? Where it's like, you don't explain that, or you get to that's as late as possible, just before the action, and then you get out as quickly as possible. Then next scene is, you're running into the hospital, or it's more, you try and write visually, and, it's the whole, show them, don't tell them.
Yep.
But it's funny, she had all these things that.
Do you remember the name of the book? Or
No, that's the problem.
Wow.
So many people. I actually was interviewed by the Atlantic magazine, and I remember the reporter was like, "You can't remember what it was." Like, no, I can't. And what's even worse is I gave it to somebody, and I said, because he said, "Hey," he was talking to me about writing a memoir, and he said, "Do you have any stuff?" And I said, "I'll tell you the best book I have. And you can read it literally. You can read this book in an hour or 2." And I gave him the book, and I said, "I want that book back." I never got the book back.
I am literally going to go to my backpack right now, just because I'm curious if it's the book.
That would be interesting. One of the things I remember about the book is that she talks about, one of her memoirs, she talked about how when she was a child, she literally used to walk to school, to the bus stop, and it was 3, how it's the cliche, you walk 3, people say, "Oh, I used to walk to school 3 miles back, uphill both ways."
Yeah.
And she said, "I used to walk to the bus stop," which literally was 3 miles away from my house. And, as a child, she mentions this in the book, and she says later on in life, after I'd written my memoir, it'd gone out, she said her husband, they were taking a trip, and she went back to her house where she grew up when she was 7 or 8 years old, and used to tell people this all the time. She said, "I'm telling you, it wasn't half a mile." But as a 7-year-old, it felt like forever to the bus stop, right? So she just say, "I literally did walk 3 miles back and forth." It was like quarter of a mile or something.
So I don't know if this is the person, but the author of this book is a super famous, in the niche, sci-fi writer. The original cover had a sailing boat on it, and it's actually called Sailing
the Sea of Story.
Right. So,
and it's tiny.
It's tiny. The author's name is Ursula Le Guin. If she has written memoirs, I don't know. But the reason I got into this is because she is a highly lauded sci-fi author.
I'm going to take a picture of this so that I can look it up.
And I want to see if the stories that you're talking about are in this.
Have you read it yet?
Not yet. This is actually what I'm reading on the next plane flight. The book I read right before this is something called Save the Cat. Save the Cat is like a crash course in screenwriting. And it's really been, that was an awesome book for me to start understanding screenwriting. And this is a book that everybody I've ever spoken to in the writing industry praises this book.
It's funny. It's got little sailboats here. It's got a little sailboat.
Yeah.
And it's only 140 pages. Or I said it's like 100 pages. Yep. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, definitely. I'll order that.
I am 100% gonna.
It was
lose my shit.
It was great. It was great. It was probably the best one I had written, because she just explains that, especially writing a memoir, it's not about accuracy. It's about how you recall things and how you remember, this is how I felt at the time. It's from your perspective. I want to say, is she the one that had said something about the whole, your version, their version, the truth? And she said some little, I think she said something about that where it was, and I thought, she was like, well, a memoir is your version. So I'm like, she was like, she's like, well, listen, a memoir is your version. And then she gives the example of the walking to the home
Walk
3 miles,
yeah.
4 miles back uphill both ways to school, But yeah, so I wrote that story. And of course, being in prison, writing stories and letting people read them and just having a little audience, you start to realize,
what works and what doesn't
works
work.
and what, like, nobody's ever interested in this. Things that I found interesting or that I did that I thought were interesting, I realized right away, like, nobody cares about that. They only care about this. And then sometimes simplifying the story, because, parts of my story, I would initially explain, like, what debt to income ratio is, why it's important, why this, why that. And then you realize, like, all I really have to say is, I made W-2s so that I could qualify for the loan.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain that you have to get the debt to income ratio right, because the way the underwriting calculates DTI, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because that's the nuts and bolts of why this works.
Right.
Skip that. Cut to the chase. So, you learn that. I wrote it, and then they read it, and they tell you what you liked, and you tweak this and tweak that, and everybody had lots of time. And in prison, there were guys there in the low. There were guys that were in prison that were very, very smart. There are school teachers. There were a couple guys there from NASA. There were guys that, there were very, very, a lot of guys have, they run Ponzi schemes. They've got finance degrees. These aren't crack dealers.
Right.
Like, these guys are established, sharp guys that have nothing to do, and they were your editors. Hey, boom, read this for me, will you? Sure. Give them a pen, and they write notes. And so I learned how to do that. And once I learned how to do that, I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
And then I started writing other guys' stories, and then then it gets to the point where you start writing synopses of the stories, and then people are coming around asking me, like, yo, bro, you wrote that guy so and so story. I read the synopsis. Do you have another one? I'm like, well, yeah. Well, I'm not on him. They're like, no, like, anything on drugs? I'm here for drugs. And you're like, yeah, I do, actually. And you give it to them. Or a guy be like, you have anything on credit card fraud?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, actually, if this guy that did counterfeiting, I'd give him that story. And before you know it, people are walking by you. Bro, I just read that story of yours, Cox. And you're like, I've never talked to this guy.
Yeah.
You start to kind of be almost like a little celebrity. People want to read your stories, and people are lining up, and they're coming to you and you're starting to think, I never thought I was any good at writing story. I used to say I'm a good storyteller. I'm not a great writer. I'm a good storyteller. But then towards the end, when I was sending my stories to writers all over the place, journalists all over the place, and they're coming back with these letters like, yo, I'm not interested in the story. I can't really, there's nothing I can help you with on this, because I'm trying to get them to help me get something into Rolling Stone or whatever, GQ. They're like, yeah, I'm booked. I can't do it. But I wanted to go ahead and say that, I find what you're doing fascinating, and to be honest with you, bro, you should think about pursuing this outside, because you're an amazing writer. And then, you've got guys this guy's doing this 20 years. He's saying I'm an amazing writer. This, like, you hear it over and over, and then you talk to a literary agent or two, and they're saying, no, you're really a good writer. And you're like, well, I'm a good storyteller. Like, no, bro, you're a good writer. Like, this is, and so I got to a point where I was like, and I really liked it, and I figured I probably won't go to prison for this, And the judge had been so adamant about me not committing fraud again. He's really, really serious about it. So I thought, I should try and do something related to this. And if I make money at it, great. And if I don't, well, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Worrying about making money is what got me to prison. So yeah, I just started doing it, and I also, because having read, also listen to this. There was a guy who was a professor who was in prison, who taught the creative writing class. I took that class several times. I say his name was Mike or Robert. Anyway, so I had taken it several times. And so having read those books and taken that class, as I would hear people's story, you're looking for things, right? I'm trying to figure out, is this guy a sympathetic hero? Is he an anti-hero? Is he a what type of protagonist is this person? So, and you kind of figure it out. And then as they're telling their story, and then suddenly they're like, yeah. Well, my mom left when I was such and such. You're like, whoa. Well, what happened there? How old were you? Did that bother you? Well, what happened when she left? Because I'm realizing that can make him a sympathetic person. You left when you were 7 years old. You remember standing in the dirt driveway crying as your mother drives off with all of her stuff. People's hearts are going to go out to you.
Right.
Like you were raised by your sister who was a stripper, and you still, like, oh my God, like this is great. Your misery. You're a horrible upbringing. Thank God you suffered so much. Like I could use that. Yeah. So you start looking for those things, and that's how you kind of craft that story. Like, and you realize too, it's so funny too, because you start to realize how many times, especially you can never really watch a movie afterwards, because you're sitting there watching a movie and suddenly, did you ever see the movie? This is a good example. Sniper or Shooter. Shooters are with Mark Wahlberg. So,
I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's sitting there, and the helicopter comes in and flies in, or they drive up whatever it is. They drive up the dirt road, and he's there, and he's clearly a sniper, and he comes up. And I'm like, he's a reluctant hero. They're going to ask him to do something. He doesn't want to do it. He's done with them. I'm done with the military, what they did to me. It's a whole thing back. But then there will be some reason that he decides to do this favor for them. And so they have to convince him, so he's the reluctant hero, right? And then there's just a different character, and that's what he becomes. And when you're talking to someone, you start to realize, like the CIA comes to you, and you're like, I don't want to work for the CIA. I'm working for this guy. So I'm going to be a pilot, or I'm going to be whatever, but then 9/11 happened, and you decided to call that guy that left the card, said, just in case you change your mind. And 2 weeks later, 9/11 happens, and you said, I want to sign up. You see what I'm saying? There's some catalyst. What was the catalyst? Maybe it's just during the conversation. Maybe it's 2 weeks later, something happens.
Right.
Like, what kind of a hero are you? And so you start to realize those types of things, and and it's always a progression. Nobody ever just decides to run a Ponzi scheme. You know what I'm saying? It's always a progression. It started off legitimate, and then it always starts the same way. We had one bad quarter. What do we do? I lied. I knew if I told these guys I just lost 20% of their fortune, they would pull out. So I lied, and I said we only made 1% last quarter. And I thought I'd make it up in the next quarter. But the next quarter, we didn't make it up. But before you know it, I could never make it up. So then what did I do? I realized I just had to borrow more money to pay these guys their dividends or their whatever. So I started borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, trying to keep all the plates in the air as long as possible. It's always the same way. It's the same stories. And plus, I like nonfiction better because the stories you really just can't make it up. You can't, I remember Mike Hudson. I just remember Mike Hudson was telling me a story one time. And he's like, so, his partner had been doing so much, had been shooting or something. And so he's like, yeah, and you do it so much, and then like his veins had collapsed, and then this, and he's bent over naked, and the hooker's pushing rocks into his ass. Because that's another way to it consume. So I remember starting the scene out with,
oh my God,
so and so is bent over naked with his ass cheeks, and the hooker was shoving a rock, whatever, an 8-ball or whatever it was into his ass, and it was just like, it was just such a you're getting into it as late as possible, out as early. I'm like, so what do we do? Let's jump straight to the hooker shoving the thing in his ass. So it was a great attention getter. So, but yeah, you can't make that up, bro. I'm never gonna come up with that. Yeah. When he said it, I was like, okay, yeah. What'd you just say? He's like, yeah. I go, why? And then he explains why, and I'm like, I love it. It's great. I could never come up with that. You just keep writing. But yeah, it's definitely a process. I mean, it's fun, and I like it.
Well, I mean, what I've discovered in the process of writing my memoir, just like you're saying, is that the stories are there. They're so accessible.
Yeah.
It is about understanding what people do want to hear, what they don't want to hear, and then getting the scenes right, getting the blocks right, getting the progression right. And we've been getting a lot of really excellent praise for Shadow Cell initially. We've gotten it from literary groups. We've gotten it from individual readers. So I'm really excited for the launch. But the bug that I have now, right? I've been bitten by the creativity bug where it's like, hey, what else can we write? What other stories can we bring to life, fiction or nonfiction?
Right.
Right? Because it's really, it's pretty addictive. I'm more able to understand the writer Matt Cox that I met 3 years ago. Right. Now that I've gone through the process of writing my own book.
Oh, if I could just write, if I thought I could just write true crime stories and make like a good living, the problem is the disparity between writing, being a regular writer, and being a bestseller is so massive. You know, it's same thing with like being a professional, like a successful professional comedian, right? The guys who are at the comedy club who are making $75 a show, and the guys that are selling out stadiums that are making $200 and $300 and $500,000 a show, like there's no in between. There's no middle class. It's the haves and the have-nots. Like you've got to do it for. It's a labor of love because there are very few professional writers that are writing. Unless maybe I guess if you're writing for maybe a magazine or something, and let's face it, you know, how many of those jobs are going to be gone soon? But yeah, if I could just write true crime and make like a good living doing it, like I would love to do that. And it's so much fun too. It's like being it's like being a detective, right? Like you have to order the documents and get them in. And by the time most of these guys' stories were done, I knew way more about their case than they did. I'm telling them, no, here's how you got caught. So-and-so got, you know, a guy named Pookie? And they're like, yeah. You know, his name's Robert, you know, John. Yeah. What? Okay, he and another guy robbed the 7-Eleven. He got caught. He then cooperated against so-and-so, and then he told the agents he could set you up. I don't know exactly what he did because they didn't put that part in. It was redacted. And he's like, Pookie's aunt called me, and she's the chick that I showed up to sell the rock. So he got his aunt to set me. They're like, guys are like, oh my, I never knew. I didn't even know she was involved. Well, of course, it's his aunt. He got her involved. But yeah, you learn so much stuff, and it's so much fun to read the documents and get them in. It's exciting when they come in the mail or the email, and you're like, whoa, they're gonna print this out. You know, yeah, it's great. I wrote my wife's story. You know, I might actually turn my wife's story into a book. I wrote a synopsis. It's like 14,000 words. Rolling Stone was going to publish it. They kept putting it off. And finally I got so frustrated. And then when I finally got the guy on the phone, I was like, yeah, well, what's taking so long? He was like, well, you know, there's no hurry. It's an evergreen story. And I went, no, we're done. You know what I'm saying? No, I'll just publish it. Yeah. And then we were having to trim it down from like 14,000 words to like 7. And so I just said, yeah, I'm just going to publish the 14,000 word version. The truth is, if I just double that in size, maybe let's say tripled it. Let's say I got it to 50,000 words, which I could easily. That's a memoir. I could put that book out. Would it make any money? No, of course not. But it might be a series. You know, you don't know. Argo is written by Joshua Bierman. Joshua Bierman had published 10 articles prior to that, roughly. He'd never optioned anything, never sold anything. He was getting paid $5,000, $7,000 for an article, publishing them in GQ or whatever. And Matt Damon read The Great Escape and went to him, and they optioned it, 18-month option. I think he then re-optioned it. When he re-optioned it, he still didn't have time to do it. So he said, gave it to Matt Damon. It became Argo. As soon as that came out, everything he'd ever written got optioned. Yeah. And every story he ever published got optioned. Then he started a website and started, because it's such a process to get your book turned into an article. Yeah. He just started writing articles and putting it on his own website. Sold. sold every one of them option. Now he lives off of options and the conversion of those options into actual films. But see, it was nothing. He went years starving. And then you just need that one. And that's why I keep saying, if I just get one thing made, everything else will be optioned.
So that is very similar to the story that we're going through right now with Shadow Cell. Right. We were nothing in a garage until we had a good conversation on the internet. And then because we grew on the internet was the only reason a book agent was willing to take us seriously, because they were like, oh, you have
a following.
You have a following. So you have a good story and a following. Let's give it a shot. Right?
You have a unique story is what you have. You have, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good story, but you also have a very unique story.
Agreed. But I mean, you're still taking the risk. You don't know whether or not I'm a good writer. You don't know whether or not I can tell a story. You don't know whether or not the market's going to be ready for the book when it comes out, because when you agree to write a book and when the book is published, I mean, this is a 3.5 year, almost a 4 year process for us. That's a huge change in the marketplace. Now, it just so happened that our marketplace changed for the better.
Right.
Because in 2021, when this thing was starting, there was no war in Israel. There was no war in Ukraine. There was no trade war that the United States was running. There was no like massive conflict, or there was no depreciation or crashing of the American economy. Like it was pre-COVID even.
Well, thank God for you that everything went to shit.
Everything went to shit. And now, theoretically, it will either help or hurt the book. But my point with all of this is, you've got to put in the good faith effort. It's the person who quits after 6 months or a year is never going to have the success. You've got to be the one that keeps trying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to say, you could keep writing because there's so many things that you could. Look, you wrote a couple thousand words of Frank Amadeo's book, right? And that was just you just kind of commenting on a few things that I threw out. Hey, this question. It's funny, too, because I met you through another guy, and I said this was another podcaster that was going to have me on his podcast, and he said to me, so I contacted him. I said, hey, I'm writing this book. It'd be great if I could get a former CIA or someone who had worked for the CIA, their input on some things. And he had actually told me just during conversation, hey, I know several CIA agents. So I called him back. I said, you said you know several CIA agents? He goes, yeah. I said, and he goes, I know 3. And I said, who will be the most vocal and be willing to give me an honest opinion of what's going on? And he goes, oh, you want to talk to Andrew Bustamante? I said, oh, okay. And then I sent it to you, and I thought, I had whatever it was, 15, no, maybe 10 questions. And every question you came back. And I mean, it wasn't like yes, no, or yeah, that's possible. It was 3 or 4 paragraphs on every single question. I was like, oh, this is great. So, I mean, I threw them all in there, rewrote them a little bit so they dovetailed into what I was saying and had your quotes. And it made the book so much better. But you could do that with anything, because you have an expertise in so many different categories that you could take anybody's story and rewrite that story or take that story and expand on the story. And the thing is, too, books don't have to be long. Like when I started writing in prison, I thought it has to be at least 300 pages. And books are 150 pages, 200 pages.
Boom.
Yeah.
140 pages, right?
Right. And people buy, I didn't even consider that like, is that even a book? You know that the definition of a novel, it has to be over 50. It used to be. I don't know if it still is. Definition of a novel is, 1, a novel is nonfiction. Is fiction, of course. But 2, it's over 50,000 words. They don't make nobody's writing 50,000 word books. They're all 200 pages is roughly about 40, 45,000. 200 pages is about 50, 60,000 words. But books are coming out that are 150 pages, and that's probably 40, 50,000 words. So you don't even have to write a lot. You could just take a subject and run with it, And who knows what, like if your thing gets turned into a series or a movie and you wrote it and you're obviously on screen as having written, or it was adapted from your, you now have that now. And now the way Hollywood looks at it is he's got a proven track record.
Yeah.
And now you can end up,
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's I've had the chance to consult on the Amazon series Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I've had a chance to support some new projects that are coming out that are under NDA. And then we have multiple TV projects that we've been able to help develop and advise on because
you're way ahead of the curve.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm not, but what I'm saying is that I've learned in that industry that it's very, very fickle and very unpredictable. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to follow the model that you just talked about with Argo, right?
Yeah.
You want to be the person who everyone comes to on your own website with your own product at your own pricing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're always the one pitching. And if you're the one pitching, there's 50,000 other people out there pitching all the time. And the winner of the pitch often doesn't boil down to skill or expertise. It boils down to a mixture of luck and access.
Yeah, exactly. It's me, Tom and Brad bump into each other at Jennifer's party, and next thing you know, they're making, you know, Dumbo Drop. You know, that was a movie where they, do you ever remember that?
Oh my gosh.
Where Dumbo Drop was the movie they made where they took an elephant and they dropped it out of an airplane during the Vietnam War or something. With Ray Liotta. Because he was broke. He had just gotten a divorce and needed money. So they paid him $500,000 or $1 million, and he decided, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do this. We got Ray Liotta. He's desperate. And we got this script, and let's put it in. I mean, just fucking failure.
I was just in LA, I mean, like a week ago. That was where I started the kind of podcast tour to promote the book. And while I was there, I was talking to somebody who was explaining why Nicolas Cage was in almost every bad movie that you can remember from like 97, 98 until 2010. And it's kind of a cool story because apparently Nicolas Cage had a manager or some kind of person who was in charge of his finances. So he was living this lavish lifestyle, trusting his money manager to tell him like, hey, you got to pull back here. Hey, you can't do that there. So the money manager never did that. And the money manager made bad investments of Nick's money. And then Nick lived his lifestyle. And then come like late 90s, early 2000s, he's broke. So broke that the money manager's like, well, you could just claim bankruptcy. And Nick was like, fuck that. Yeah. I am not going to claim...
Nicolas Cage. I can't claim bankruptcy. Like, it's not going to look good.
And apparently he was also so principled by the way he was raised. He was like, I'm not going to just wash away debt that I spent.
Right.
I have to earn it back. So he went to his agent, his actual like booking agent, and was like, we're going to work our ass off and we're going to build back everything that I spent. And I am not going to take loans and I'm not going to claim bankruptcy. I'm not going to do any of that shit. And then that's why you saw Nick Cage in all these movies when we were younger, that we seen were bad movies. And we kind of started to associate Nick Cage as the guy that was in the bad movies. He was building back his whole career. He was doing the responsible thing, which was such an inspiring story for me because I was like, fuck yeah, like that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, a lot of these guys get in trouble. You know, you surrounding yourself by yes men is a major problem.
Yeah, I just got a few questions that our shorts guys would like you to answer. And how does a normal person get into the CIA?
Oof. I mean, I don't know what a definition of a normal person is.
How does somebody get into the CIA?
I like that. I think that's an easier... If you think you're normal, you're already fucked. Don't even try.
Right.
If you think you're not normal, if you think you're smarter than the average bear, maybe you've got an edge, or maybe you're a little bit more ethically flexible than the average person, there are really three primary ways into the CIA. The first is what my wife did. You apply. Lots and lots of people just straight up apply. I think it's something like 75,000 applications a year. The second option is that you're recruited from the military. And there's lots of conversion that comes from the military. Army, Air Force, Navy, Intel, special ops, SIGINT, linguists, you name it, right? There's all sorts of people that get converted from military and they come in. Sometimes that's because CIA is present at your military base. Sometimes it's because the military reaches out to you and says, hey, we've got a CIA person here that wants to talk to you. The third is that CIA will contact you because they come across you someplace. So they might come across your resume because you submitted it for a job to a different government organization. They might come across your resume because you submitted it at a job fair. They might come across your resume because you submitted it to a government contractor and that government contractor flagged you for somebody else. But CIA might come to you and ask you to essentially submit a clandestine application or a secret application, a backdoor application directly to them rather than through the front door on the website.
What type of person makes a great CIA officer?
Like what characteristics?
Yeah, so
Someone who's morally flexible.
it's true. Yeah, great CIA officers are kind of shitty people.
Right.
If you're going to be great at one thing, you can't really be great at the other thing. So I would say a great CIA officer is somebody who's willing to put the CIA first. They're also willing to put kind of principles aside and ethics aside to do whatever needs to get done for the mission. It's somebody who plays by the rules. So they're creative enough to work inside a box, but they still work inside a box. They don't try to go too far outside of the box to be a great CIA officer. Because when I think of a great CIA officer, I'm thinking about somebody who will reach the pinnacle of their career inside the organization. I don't think of somebody who comes in and shakes everything up like they do in the movies and then, goes on to do great things. That's not how it works. If you shake shit up, you're never going to get promoted.
Three ex-wives, their kids don't talk to them.
Yep.
Everybody thinks they're an asshole.
They've got a bloodshot nose and a big belly because they drink to get rid of the stress. Yeah.
What's the most valuable skill that you learned from the CIA that the average everyday person could use?
The CIA gave me a lot of really useful skills. Okay, so the number one skill that I would say that they gave me that the average person can use is something called perception versus perspective. We all live in a world that we engage with through our own five senses. That is our perception of the world. I go outside here in Florida and I think it's hot. You may not think it's hot. You might think it's hotter than I think it is. Some people might think it's pleasant. Who knows? It's all different because it's our perception. CIA taught us that your perception is completely irrelevant. All that matters is the perception of your target. And if you can think like your target, then that gives you perspective. Perspective is more valuable than perception because perspective is based on the objective information in the environment. And it accounts for both what you see, what you feel, your five senses, but also their five senses, all of your lived experience, all of their lived experience, plus the situation as it stands right now. So when you leverage perspective, you can start to think like your target. You can start to predict your target. You can start to anticipate your target accurately because you're not just assuming based off of your perceptions, you're actually assessing because of your perspective.
So I have a follow-up on that. You ever heard of Victor Lusting? I've
heard the name.
Yeah, he was a con man. He actually sold the Eiffel Tower twice.
That's why I've heard this. Yes.
His big thing was to go on these cruises. I think this is back in like the 20s or 30s.
Yes.
He'd go on the cruises and he did the money box where he would, he had a box or this little machine that would take whatever, $20 bill or $100 bill, and you could roll it in there and it would actually make a duplicate $100 bill or whatever. Anyway, complete, BS obviously didn't work, but he had a whole thing, and he also would raise money for plays that never happened. He was just a straight con man, but he had I think it was the 5 or 10 con man rules. Can you look it up? Victor Lusting.
10 con man rules?
Yeah,
10 con artist rules? Something like
10
that?
con artist rules or 5 con artist rules, Victor Lusting. And and it was exactly what you're saying. He was saying, look, don't, is how to endear yourself to your victim. And one was, you don't ever talk about politics. You don't ever talk about, and first it was, you don't talk about politics. You wait to find out what your victim's politics are, and you emulate them.
Yep, you mirror them.
Same thing with religion. Wait and find out what their religious views are, and you emulate. Don't ever talk about women or talk about sex unless they do, and then only engage slightly. Like, he had all these little tiny rules.
Yeah.
All right. Here are the 10 commandments for con men.
There it is.
Be a patient listener. Never look bored. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them.
Then agree with them.
Same with religion. Yep. Hint at sex talk, but don't follow up unless the other fellow shows interest.
I don't know if Victor Lusting's words would have been hit that sex talk, but this might be a translation.
Never discuss illness unless some special concern is shown. Never pry into a person's personal circumstances. Never boast. Never be untidy, and never get drunk.
Yeah. right? Like he has
that's the rules of espionage, right?
I was gonna say, right? Like it's a way to get into to endear yourself to another person. You don't want to offend them. You want to, right? So that's kind of
that kind of follows up on this last question where you guys can kind of add on to it. This is the last one: is how do you manipulate somebody to get the information or what you want?
Human beings are shockingly easy to manipulate. I'm sure that you've had the same experience, right? If you give them a chance to just say what they want to say, you agree with what they say, that makes them feel like they're interesting and correct, which makes them want to say more. And then all you have to do is basically find a way to connect what they're saying, which is going to include what they're feeling, what they think, why they think it. You just have to find a way to connect all that with what you want in the end. Whether you want to sell them something, whether you want them to sign on a dotted line or donate money or whatever else. That's really how all that it takes to manipulate somebody.
I was gonna say that's very much the 10 Commandments thing, right?
People will hang themselves. And you put so much power in the hands of the person sitting across from you if you don't realize how easy it is for us to all just lay it on the table, right? You have to show some restraint not to lay it on the table. Because it's funny to me when you watch two people have a conversation, a lot of times what it is they're competing with each other. Mm-hmm. It's like, here's my story. Oh, well, here's my story. Well, my story is better here. And here's a better story. It's like this one-upmanship. And if you're the person sitting beside those two, you just walked away with the ocean of information between these two, plus understanding the dynamics of how they both handle conflict, et cetera, et cetera. It's like incredible what can happen if you just refrain from speaking, if you just try to listen, if you just take a few notes, if you make callbacks to things that somebody said once in the past. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Just periodically ask a question here or there and let them just keep talking and talking. As most people like talking about themselves. Of course, you're an introvert. You like my wife her answers are like, yeah, no, I went to Okeechobee High School. Like it was just like it was fine. Jeez, you just pull a teeth. But yeah, I think most people like, and the more they talk, the better they feel about themselves, the situation, the conversation. They walk away saying, "Wow, that was a great conversation.
That was a great conversation.
Yeah.
That guy was so nice.
Yeah, but
I can't wait to talk to him again."
Yeah, but you talked maybe 5% of the time. Yeah. And they talked 95% of the time, but they feel like they had a great conversation.
And then it's so strange. We feel like people are supposed to remember us. Fuck no. You want people to forget you. You want people to only remember you when they see you again. And they're like, oh, I remember you. And then they have all these good feelings. They don't even know why they have the good feelings. They have the good feelings because the last time you talked, you shut up. They told you their life story. They walked away from that feeling good about themselves. Wow, I'm interesting. I'm valuable. That person really connected with me. They really heard me. And then 2 fucking minutes later, they don't remember your name until they see you 2 weeks later at the coffee shop and they're like, oh, hey, how are you doing? And they want to talk again.
So, what's funny is I used to always say, like with women, you always leave them laughing. I used to say, because I want them to, in order for them to remember me and think about me, once you get them laughing a little bit, then you go, hey, listen, I got to get going though. It was great meeting you, and walk away, because their last moments, their last thoughts are, he was so funny. And when they're laughing and I got to go. So they're still laughing. You know what I'm saying? So you leave them laughing. They feel good about the conversation. They feel good about you. They want to see you again. And that way and
they don't control when they get to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You control when that happens again. So for them, it's a surprise, even though you already knew that you were going to show up the following Thursday at the gym at the same time.
So I remember this one chick. She gave me her phone number. She gave me her phone number, and I went home that night and I called her, and when she picked up the phone, she goes, wow. She's like, you didn't even wait like 24 hours. She's like, you must really like me. And I was just like, God, this chick. So when's the book come out?
The book comes out on September 9th. It'll be everywhere worldwide. You'll find it at Target. You'll find it at Walmart. You'll find it at Amazon. You'll find it at Barnes & Noble. Go out, grab it anywhere you need to. You can also click on the link below. I'll make sure that you get a link directly to the book sales page.
Hey, you guys, I appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. And please share the video. Thank you very much. See ya.